we could all please rise. Pastor Brad Rogers with the First Presbyterian Church will lead us in prayer this evening. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, thank you for the opportunity, and let's say a word of prayer. Gracious and holy God, giver of all life and the giver of every blessing, we give you thanks for you place in leadership those whom you've called according to your purposes. We ask your blessing on the people whom you have called to lead this community in which we live and work and play. We pray that through them, that you would bless our city, that we might be more just, more prosperous, more loving, and more faithful to you. We ask for your leadership to guide this meeting and for your spirit of peace and reconciliation to permeate this meeting in our city. We pray for your protection for these leaders and for all who protect our city. Grant to these men and women and to us your wisdom and your courage to know what to do and what is right and what is good and what is true. May they and may we always be guided by your Spirit. We pray these things in the name of the God whom I serve. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Councilwoman Carumba, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba. Here. Councilman DeWitt.
Here.
Councilwoman Carr.
Here.
Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Here.
Councilman Gibson.
Here.
Councilman Forbes.
Here. Good evening, everybody. How are you? We have a nice crowd here this evening. Thanks for being here with us. We are going to start with public comment on agenda items. Members of the public that would like to speak, please come forward at this time. Good evening.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Simmons and worthy council. My name is Richard Check. I'm called Rick. And I rise to talk to you about the agenda item added as an addendum by Amy Quarimba concerning the Big Carlos Bridge. For that issue, I have 2 points that I want to consider, or want you to consider in any case. The first is safety. Not too many people have talked about that with the designs given. And the second is cost. Regarding safety, my seasonal home is Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I spend about 4 months a year up there, more or less. In August of 2007, the Interstate 35 bridge fell into the Mississippi River and killed 13 people. The people in the school bus got out alive. A lot of other lives were altered, and it's over now. The summary conclusion by those who would make the summary said that it wasn't the rusty gussets that caused the issue, might have had a load contributing factor that caused the fall, but it was the design people. The bridge had been there some 30 years. In any case, it needs to be addressed relative to a safety issue. Construction of a high bridge, I think, can create problems in a salt environment. The wind effect of the Sky Bridge in Tampa is known to all because occasionally it's shut down, slam dunk, due to the wind. It's just not safe. A 60-foot bridge certainly isn't as high as that bridge, but it still has issues of safety. And at a time when people need to exit the island, and we have 2 islands that may need to exit. One is the Estero Island, the other is the Little Hickory, Lover's Key, Black Island chain. That bridge becomes very important. So I think people ought to look at the safety, not discussed in the high bridge versus the drawbridge. The drawbridge can be designed so that it never falls. The draw stays. But the high bridge may have issues. So I just would like you to consider that. The second is cost. And reportedly, the cost for the drawbridge it really goes up with the maintenance costs. Those are borne by the county, if I'm not mistaken. The cost recently, and this is perhaps rumored, but it's more than a rumor, of the high bridge will cost an extra $15 million. Supposedly that's going to be asked to be shared between Fort Myers Beach and Bonita Springs. And if that happens, it's a budget item that might not really be necessary or worked in if indeed we went with the drawbridge. So, I'm not going to talk long. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you early. It's a very significant issue. The third concept is increased traffic. And if we do the high bridge, perhaps no more increased traffic than the drawbridge, but I'm going to mention the word Causeway Bridge, because that's something that someday we're going to have to think about. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, Kathy McGrath. First comments are on the proclamations and all, in the order that they're on the thing. We're so fortunate to have this young lady, Claire Sattler, how well she did. And I watch Jeopardy all the time, and I especially like the teen tournaments. And I was sitting there with my white knuckles the whole time. I'm sure everyone was. But everyone would love to have a daughter like Claire, so congratulations to her. And, of course, Mike Scott. He's not here, I know. I brought my T-shirt for when he was elected, but that's okay. And congratulations to Brian, now I'm going to pronounce his name right, Prespaluski, I learned, on his promotion. And also for Chad, recognition of his 12 years of service here. He waves to me when he goes by in the boat and everything. As I said to Captain Blake Lee, and I've said to many of them, we love our community policing here. They're family. But, you know, and as it should be, they get promotions and then they leave us. And then a new group comes in. But congratulations to them all. And finally, my comments on the bridge are nothing for or against. There you're going to have expert witnesses and expert decisions. The only comments are in general that I want to make. I don't know whether it is a law or just something someone came up with, but I've heard it before. It's called for the greater good. And I don't know, this is a very poor analogy, the bridge over San Carlos and East Tennessee, but I was very young in the mid-30s when the government went in. And you have to remember, at that time, East Tennessee had no power. I repeat, no power. And the people who were flooded out were born, generations born, lived there, went to school there, and died there, and were buried there. And they had to literally move all of the bodies and everything. So I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know whether it's just a comment, like I said, a poor analogy, but sometimes things are done for the greater good. But you're going to be hearing a lot of expert testimony, so I'm not for or against it. I want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Councilman McCourt, welcome.
For the record, Pat McCourt. I said it, okay. First of all, thank you for moving the podium. I think that's an excellent improvement in our meeting. I'm here to talk a little bit about the bridge, very basically. And I'll give you the bottom line. There is nothing, and I say nothing, good in this for Bonita Springs. It's all negative. And if you look at this thing, first of all, I could sit here and challenge the numbers forever until like bore you to death. But I think it's pretty obvious that somehow they can build a big high bridge cheaper than they can repair, or they can build a lower bridge. I don't understand that, and something tells me that there's some funny numbers in there somewhere, but I haven't dug them all out yet. First of all, the notion that they're going to build a $87 million bridge and only put 2 lanes on it has got to raise some questions. And they have, like, I think 10-foot wide path on each side in case you run out of gas in the middle. You got a place to pull over on. Who are they kidding? It's perfectly obvious what they plan to do. The development on Fort Myers Beach is out of sight, and the Lover's Key facility, in my opinion, is a world-class facility that's going to do nothing but bring more and more traffic. And it should, because it's a world-class facility. And Bonita Beach Fort Myers Beach wants to do more development, but they can't do it because they can't get the cars on and off. And the only alternative is over the Matanzas Bridge, which is a disaster. I'm sure all of you have been through there. The only other obvious alternative is they want to send the traffic down to us. And they want to put 4 lanes on that bridge, and then they're going to repair or replace the other 3 bridges to make them 4-laners. It'll come down Hickory Boulevard, which doesn't make us happy, of course, with 4 lanes, and then the space is there, they can do it, and we have really no control over that. But Bonita Springs is going to wind up with the traffic that they can't handle up there, and that's a huge negative as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is the cost, and everybody's giving you all kinds of other costs, but let me give you one other cost. First of all, somebody mentioned a 60-foot high bridge. I don't think that's going to fly, because I think the Corps of Engineers, when they get a hold of it, are going to say there's got to be at least 70 foot. And they'll come out at the last minute and say, it's not our fault, it's got to be 70 foot. Because a sailboat, for example, can't get under a 60-foot high bridge. So if it's to accommodate the boats, which I think it is, 60 foot is not going to fly. Or a bridge that opens that can take any height, obviously. So that said, the next thing is to throw together some numbers. And if they're going to spend $87 million to build this bridge, then how much more are they going to spend to put another 2 lanes on it? How much more are they going to spend to widen the other 3 bridges, and then 4-lane, about 20 miles of highway to come down through Bonita, to run into a bunch of traffic lights on Bonita Beach Road to get out to the freeway? It's not going to work, and it doesn't make any sense. There is one solution that I think they have to address before they go forward with this, and that's the notion of building a causeway. That's the answer for everybody. It gets traffic from all of the people, the 600,000 people or whatever in Lee County that want to go to the beach. It gets them there directly. And the beach is going to become more and more profitable or interesting as we go along, because not only is it currently a world-class facility, but it has the opportunity to expand into Big Hickory Island. They own a big chunk of property there, you know. So we're sitting on a huge development here, and I think they see it, but they won't admit it to us that that's what they want to do. So I think it's a disaster if they're allowed to send all that traffic down to us.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Rich Donnelly. I am the current president of Friends of Lovers Key State Park, and I'm here to represent Friends of Lovers Key. I'm not representing the state park in any way. I think the state park system is surprised with these developments and officially have not taken a position at this time. I think we can imagine what it might be. But on behalf of the Friends of Lovers Key support organization, I would tell you that Friends of Lovers Key is a world-class operation. There are 175 state parks in the system. Ours is the second most visited park in the system, with over 1 million visitors a year. We're growing rapidly. Tomorrow, we're having a groundbreaking ceremony for a new visitor center facility, which has been an exciting event for us and a culmination of 10 years of work. But let me just say that with the bridge, whether it's 60 feet or 40 feet, it's going to impact the land that Lovers Key has, because on this end of the island, where Lovers Key is, we have property on both sides. And we can imagine that there's certainly going to be an extension of the ramp system and other construction issues that will impact certainly the north gate to our project, and there's a children's playground area over on the other side that will be impacted. We, of course, have not seen a plan of how this is going to work, but knowing that we have property on either side of where this thing is going to go, speaking for Friends of Lovers Key and the Board of Directors, we had a meeting last night and discussed it. We are officially opposed and encourage you to think about the existence of Lovers Key, located in Bonita Springs, as you know, and the impact that this bridge might have on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve LaBelle, and I'm president of the Island Beach Club Board of Directors. And you've probably heard my name around because I've been doing a lot of research. I just wanted to follow on a couple of quick things. One is just to give you some idea of the difference in terms of affecting Lovers Key State Park with this bridge. Our current bridge is about just under 1,700 feet long with a grade of between 3 and 3.5%. And if they would decide to put in the 60-foot bridge based on their statistics, it would be a 5% grade, and it would be more than twice as long. It would be from end to end of the approachways 3,500 feet. And because they have chosen to move the bridge 300 feet towards the Bonita Springs side, it's going to go even farther down towards Lover's Key State Park. So when we think about the Sun Pass and the trails, and some of us people that like to bike and walk, this new bridge is going to significantly curtail that, and I'm not sure how that all fits into the Sun Trail system, because it doesn't make any sense. The other thing is, in terms of cost, when you go to a present value cost instead of the inflated numbers that they use, the actual difference in cost is $22 million, of which 13 is to build the bridge and 9 is based on however they came up with their maintenance and operations costs, which I significantly disagree with. But that's $175,000 a year over the 75-year life of the bridge. Not exactly a huge amount that would require us to give up the environment, the ambiance, the state park, the views of the homeowners, the being able to bike, being able to get your boat through the pass. I think all those things would say that it's not a huge amount related to that. So I'm asking the City Council to put together a resolution supporting building a bridge in kind, similar to the lift bridge that we have now, similar to what the town of Fort Myers Beach has done, so that would give us a little more ammunition to go to Lee County. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that information. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Good evening, Juan.
Mayor, board members, thank you for the opportunity today. I just want to mention about the meeting we had about the program we have from the city of Bonita Springs and the city of Isla Mujeres. The program is Sister Cities. We have a great response from the rest of the community, charities, organizations, and people from the community who they have a very good interest on developing a program, continue and follow up this program. We're talking about increasing the economy on Bonita Springs. An example is our tournament of soccer is going to be international for this coming year, and we are already inviting a team from Isla Mujeres, and it's going to be probably a semi-professional team, and maybe coming and staying in our hotels and then developing a tour around the city, presenting the parks and the beaches we have, and increasing that opportunity for the people knowing our family, our city, and bring more participation of tourists. So I think it's a great opportunity for our community and also for the community in Isla Mujeres. Also, the people from different charities like the Rotary Club show interest on interchanging teachers and students. Isla Mujeres is a same situation is here, an area where a lot of tourists is where they work in Isla Mujeres, and they need a lot of people who can speak English, and then they asking to supporting them with teachers. They receive the teachers up there, and they're going to be pay them to be at the island and helping and supporting more people up there to teach English, but also send students down here, and we can do the same thing with the different programs. Is a sea lab they're working with the turtles, the sea animals, and they got great programs where our students they can develop in all their other programs and other knowledge of our sea animals here in Bonita Springs. So basically, I just want to let you know that it's a great opportunity for us to develop in different programs, and it's a win-win situation with our city, Bonita Springs, and Isla Mujeres on the program, and then hopefully we can have it more closely program and work with the city, Isla Mujeres and in Bonita Springs also.
Wonderful. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Council, what's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve in a second. Further discussion?
I-
Mike?
one-
Mike.
I guess pull F.
F?
I had a question about that. so.
Okay.
I want to speak to C, but I want to go ahead with it.
Okay. Okay, so we'll pull F. Motion to approve A through E, Laura. I suppose that's okay?
Yes,
You
yes.
won't argue with that, and Greg, you'll still second it, A through E? Okay, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Caramba,
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt,
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Okay, Councilman Gibson, item F.
On F, I was just wondering, I know zoning's not going to be doing, what is it, July? But I was wondering, the August council date, if we had another one need a continuance for whatever reason, could we leave the council one available for that reason?
Arlene, or?
We can accommodate that, that's fine, if needed.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure I wasn't closing that out for the possibility of that, so. Okay, then motion to approve then.
Second. Motion and a second to approve item F. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt,
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson,
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Okay, great.
C, I just want to.
Yes, I'm sorry. Councilwoman
No, I
Crumba.
noted when we were looking at this, that there are vacancies both in the bicycle and the tech advisory committee, and I just wondered, what process we're going through to try to get them. I think that we have 2 available in those, and if we can, do some positive,
We continue to post
Pe-
them on the website
right,
as well.
but-
If there's any other outreach we could do, we could also, from time to time, we've done press releases, kind of
so
advertising.
maybe we can be a little more
an
active. Is that a problem, having those I mean, there are 2 in each, I think, so if we could do it, I think I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to move on to proclamations and presentations. If Claire Sattler could please come forward, and her family. Please join us. Thank you, Claire. How are you? Good. Nice to see you. I'm sorry, right in the middle over here, Claire, I apologize. Yeah. Put it in the phrase of a question,
No
right?
questions.
And then you'll understand it. But Claire, I'm not sure if you know this, because we've known each other for quite a few years. You attended elementary school with our children at the Bonita Springs Charter School, and you now attend Bishop Verot High School with Petey and Elizabeth Simmons, and they could not be more excited for you. I can assure you, we watched it at our home, and we're very, very proud of you. So, on behalf of the city of Bonita Springs, this is a certificate of congratulations proudly presented to Claire Sattler in recognition of your outstanding performance on the 2018 Jeopardy Teen Tournament and winning the championship on live national television on November 20th, 2018. You are a Bishop Verot, Bonita Springs Charter School hometown inspiration. Congratulations. Signed, Mayor Peter Simmons, December 5th, 2018. And you notice I put in there on live television on November 20th. You actually went to California in August to, for the tournament, won the tournament, and had to be quiet all of August, all of September, all of October, all the way up to November 20th. So God bless you and congratulations. Would you like to?
Thank you so much. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I just want to thank everybody for watching and for being supportive here in Bonita Springs. I was just glad to do you guys proud. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And do we know where you're going to college yet? Not yet. What do you have? What are you looking at for college?
I'd love to go to MIT, but I'm also looking at Georgia Tech and Columbia, Carnegie Mellon. I want to major in biomedical engineering. So.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Congratulations. And let's see how do you say that last name? Presbeluski. If he could please come forward and his team. Prez, come on up. How are you? Nice to see you. On behalf of the City of Bonita Springs, this is a certificate of congratulations proudly presented to Captain Brian Presbeluski. Congratulations on your promotion to captain with the Lee County Sheriff's Office and in appreciation of over 13 years of dedicated service to the citizens of Bonita Springs as a member of the Lee County Sheriff's Office, City of Bonita Springs Community Policing Unit, signed Mayor Peter Simmons, December 5th, 2018. Congratulations, my friend. Dynamite.
All right, real fast, I want to thank the city, past and present council, mayors, and city managers. Without the relationship and partnership we've had here, it wouldn't have been as smooth as it did. I want to thank my bosses for letting me do my job. When I first came down to Bonita, I came from narcotics down to Bonita. I didn't even know where Bonita was because it was the farthest from 6 Mile Cypress is where we're at. People that know me personally, though, and this recognition here, this goes to all the men and women who've been assigned to Bonita Springs Community Policing. Without them, I wouldn't be standing up here. People that know me personally, I'm originally from Chicago. Bonita Springs is like a second home for me. So I appreciate everything that you guys stand for and keep the partnership up. You got good people still running it, and it's good to go.
No, and I'll just say, other than everything that you've done, maybe just kind of an asterisk for me, and we've become close personal friends and the like, and you live in Cape Coral, so every now and then on my way up to Bishop Row, I would see your car and not be able to quite catch you at a light, but during Hurricane Irma, right, we spent a few tense moments, more than a few, not knowing what the storm was going to do and riding out the hurricane, and let me just tell you, you're a leader, you're a class act, and this could not be more well-deserved. We love you, brother. Congratulations. Big brother, whatever the case may be, a hard time, we can do that now too. Gentlemen, any stories to share? Captain Lee?
Congratulations.
But not here, okay.
Not here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go Cubs.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank
Wait,
you.
wait, I think Kendra needs one.
Oh, Kendra. Hi, Chris. Wait. Sounds like the battery's dead, but I guess that's a different sound. Thank you very much. If we could have Corporal Chad Edwards come forward, please.
Chad's good at giving speeches.
Do you have family members that would like to join us?
I do have family members here. My mother,
Wonderful.
my father, and my wife.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. And I've got a note here as well is wish you the best as you move to the Marine unit. That's going to be amazing. Good for you. Hi, welcome. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Nice to see you. Hello, hello. Hi, Erica. Peter Simmons. Hi, how are you, sir? Welcome. So on behalf of the City of Bonita Springs, this is a certificate of appreciation proudly presented to Corporal Chad Edwards in recognition of over 12 years of dedicated service to our citizens as a member of the Lee County Sheriff's Office, City of Bonita Springs Community Policing Unit, signed Mayor Peter Simmons, December 5th, 2018. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, congratulations. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Chad.
And Sheriff Mike Scott was going to be with us this evening, but for those that haven't, his mother had some surgery this week, and we're going to reschedule that visit with Sheriff Mike Scott to congratulate him. Okay, we're now going to move up to item E, which is a stormwater, but are we going to change the order here a little bit, Arlene? Okay, please, could you explain that? Yeah.
Yes, please. If we could move to the city attorney's items, the consideration of an application for relief from the Bonita Beach Road temporary moratorium. Our special counsel is here to address that item.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome, David. How are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. How are you?
You got your bag of tricks there, I can see?
Always bring your bag of tricks.
Nice. Welcome. Nice to see you.
City attorney.
Oh, here. Okay. Okay, got it, yeah. Yeah, I was just looking for my. Give us just a second. Good evening, council. We have, under the moratorium for the Bonita Beach Road during the study process, if you recall, during that process, we adopted the moratorium. Section 6 of that moratorium provides a release valve, an opportunity for any project wants to move forward or feels that they've been unfairly trapped within the moratorium and their application process. I put on the board for you Section 6 of that moratorium, which are the relief criteria. You have a request for relief from Angler's Paradise. You also have in your packet a response by the city manager, which is a requirement of the ordinance. If you have not read through these, I can read them aloud for you, but you have several criteria where the property owner will be denied substantially all beneficial use of their property. Consideration of the economic impact of the temporary moratorium, the extent to which the temporary moratorium has interfered with the property owner's investment-backed expectations. You will also have the opportunity to review the petition by Angler's Paradise to see the history of the development on the property, the history of the future land use map, the history of the zoning, and a change in the development ownership over the period of time, the present nature and extent of the property, the reasonable expectations of the property owner and neighborhood property owners, and any diminution in property owners' investment-backed expectations. Now, that is not an exhaustive list, but it is some of the criteria you could consider and whether or not to grant this application.
Anglers Paradise has asked for an opportunity to present on their application, and we've agreed to give them 10 minutes to present. At that point, if you have any questions of staff or David or the applicant, you'll have an opportunity to make those questions and make a final decision. Again, this is a quasi-judicial hearing because you are reviewing it pursuant to criteria within the moratorium. So if there's been any ex parte communications or anything, now would be the time to disclose them. And with that, we'll see who the representative for Anglers Paradise is.
Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Bill Moore. I think on the speaker's card I have it as S.W. Moore with Moore, Bowman, and Ricks, along with Dean Mead Law Firm. We represent the owners of Anglers Paradise. I won't need 10 minutes. Basically, I think the application speaks for itself, prepared by Mr. Wharton. But just so you know, there was a master concept plan that was approved back in 2009 for development of this property. Because of the recession, nothing happened. I don't think we were alone in that freezing development for economic reasons. But after that, 5 years had expired. We then came in when the recession lifted and the economic opportunities changed. Made an application for reinstatement of the master concept plan. That's basically been in limbo since. We think of it as kind of a de facto moratorium. It would just slow walk the approval process. And then there was the moratorium that prevented any processing. The legal problem, well, there's several of them, but one of them that I know, I haven't talked to or met Mr. Rooney yet, but I look forward to speaking to him about it. But I know Mr. Theriak from other matters, and I think we can talk about this productively. But one of the big legal problems we have is that the moratorium basically says that you can't process a master concept plan, and it refers, or at least the denial letter, the city manager refers to, unless you come into compliance with a prospective comprehensive plan. In other words, if we agree to abide by a prospective comprehensive plan, not effective, not legally binding, then they're not going to process the master concept plan. And I think that's a real problem as a matter of law because the statutes say that, of course, the effective comp plan is the one that's in effect until the effective date of the new plan. So the result of that criterion is that we've not been able to have the master concept plan processed. That's all we're asking for, something that had been approved prior to that. And we'd respectfully ask you to at least reconsider that denial, and perhaps we could talk with counsel to be productive about that. By counsel, I mean your legal counsel, and perhaps avoid some difficulties in court later on. But we need to move forward with this project, and we're basically being frozen. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Counsel, any questions? Or no, I'm sorry, go ahead. This is your show.
No, any questions?
Yeah, I was going to
is
say,
appropriate, sir.
is that appropriate, Counsel? Do you have any questions at this time? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Moore. In your packet is a copy of the city manager's letter dated November 14th, 2018. And Derek has reviewed the criteria for the relief. There were two significant problems with the application for relief that Anglers Paradise submitted. And on page 3 of the city manager's letter, we outlined what was submitted in support of the application for relief. The ordinance that you passed stated that all evidence in support of a temporary taking or a illegal interference with a vested right needed to be submitted with the application. What you received was an unsigned and undated document entitled Application for Relief from Ordinance 17-12 of the City of Bonita Springs. No name, it wasn't notarized, we have no clue who wrote it. You also received in the packet a copy of our ordinance. And then number 3A through G, there was a letter from the engineer to Jackie Jensen. There was a project narrative and the Bonita plan consistency, the proposed schedule of uses, the proposed master concept plan, the zoning standard of review, an approval letter for the dated July 2009, a letter from the Ted Tresh, he was our traffic engineer, and a traffic impact statement for Angler's Paradise. When we reviewed items 2, 3, A through G, they were completely unrelated to the question of whether there was a temporary taking or whether there was a illegal interference with a vested right. And as a matter of law, the unsigned and undated document can't provide any evidentiary support for a claim of a temporary taking or an illegal interference with an alleged vested right. The other significant problem was the fact that the master concept plan for the property expired in 2014. And that's actually acknowledged in the traffic impact statement. As we stated in footnote 5, the traffic impact statement that was dated June 28, 2017, stated the applicant is seeking to reinstate the previously approved master concept plan that was approved under the City of Bonita Springs Ordinance number 09-06. So there are no entitlements without the master concept plan that Angler's Paradise has to develop the property. So it's illogical to contend that a temporary taking has occurred of rights that don't exist, or that a legal interference with a vested right that is based upon an expired master concept plan. The other significant issue is set forth in section 3 of your ordinance, ordinance number 17-12. And I'm going to quote just a couple lines so that the record's complete. City staff may process any permitting and zoning applications that are consistent with the Bonita Beach Road visioning and quadrant studies and the comprehensive plan amendments if the applicant is willing to voluntarily comply with the goals, objectives, and policies contained within the comp plan amendments, excuse me, as adopted in ordinance number 17-06. If the zoning ordinance has a condition requiring compliance with the Bonita Beach Road visioning study or will be approved with such condition, the development may continue to be processed. So there was a out built in the moratorium that a property owner could comply with the proposed comp plan language. There was no analysis that complying with the proposed comp plan language would interfere with a vested right or constituted a temporary taking. It was completely silent on this opt-out clause. So they failed to address that there is a potential for development to proceed if they complied with the pending comp plan language. And then what you also was also completely lacking, there was an allegation of interference with investment-backed expectations, that they made many substantial changes in position. They had incurred extensive obligations and expenses. And when you go through the application packet, there is not one document, there is not one page that addresses what they spent, what the pro forma was, what the investment expectation was. So they failed to meet their evidentiary burden to support those allegations. They're just bald allegations with no documentation. So based upon those problems with the application, the city manager denied the Angler's Paradise application for relief. And based upon what we've heard from Mr. Moore today, we do not see a basis to change the city manager's determination. Arlene, would you weigh in on that?
I concur with special counsel's recommendation.
So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Counsel?
So there was an off-ramp related to the comp plan amendment proposed with respect to Beach Road visioning. Is that what you're saying?
An off-ramp?
Well, a way to get out from under
Yes.
the moratorium.
Yes, the section that I read allowed a property owner to comply with the proposed comp plan language, and they failed to demonstrate that complying with such language would have interfered with a vested right or would have constituted a temporary taking.
Okay, thank you.
Counsel, any other questions?
No.
Okay, doesn't look like anything. Anything else?
You need a motion.
I'd make a motion to deny consistent with what the city manager has laid out in her letter and consistent with what Mr. Theriak has laid out here tonight.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion to deny and a second. Council, further discussion on that? Roll call, please. Laura, Councilwoman.
Are we going to be discussing solutions with Anglers Paradise so that they can move forward, or?
Not in this proceeding, ma'am.
But based on this vote, they still can move, if they want to reapply, there's still those avenues.
There
This
are
doesn't
still-
shut the door.
No, they
from
still
them.
have the right to submit a plan that would comply with the current comp plan language.
Okay.
They would still have the right to say that there's a temporary taking if we do, or that there's an illegal interference with a vested right, but they haven't made those allegations, and they still haven't provided any financial documentation regarding a diminution of value, interference with an investment-backed expectation, or any kind of loss.
Okay, just making sure there's no, in other words, like double jeopardy. Once we rule on this, they still have the opportunity to reapply if they meet all the criteria that's set forth.
Yeah, sorry, I've been in a lot of hearings the last couple of days, my voice is starting to go, but the short answer is that the denial that staff is recommending is based on the failure, in their opinion, of the applicant to make certain threshold levels of evidence to support the request. So they have a path forward under the ordinance to comply with the proposed comprehensive plan language, but there's also a path for them to come back and seek relief if they can complete all those requirements.
Is there a time frame on that? Do they have to wait 6 months, 1 day, whatever?
No, they
Okay.
can reply tomorrow.
And maybe we could expedite this, because this seems to be going on for a very long time.
It's not a question of whether we have to do anything as far as the relief.
But when they get, they now know, they have an outline, what they need to do. At least they should. And if they do that, we could move forward then.
If I may weigh in on that, ma'am?
Mhm.
The reason the application it was pending as long as it was, is that the parties agreed to toll and to stay this petition, because we participated in months-long negotiations to seek a global resolution. This hasn't been sitting because staff failed to process it.
No, I wasn't implying that.
But that's why it's been out there as long as it has been.
Uh-huh, okay. So the onus is on them.
Yes, ma'am.
There we go.
Council, anything else? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carr,
The motion was
To deny.
tonight, aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go on to our stormwater update, Arlene? Okay. We're going to move on to item E now, everybody. Stormwater utility project update from Stantec Consulting Services. And if you're looking for your green sheet, it's number 18-12398.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is part of our series that we committed to providing updates on the stormwater utility proposal at each of our once monthly, so that we can keep the citizens engaged as much as possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stantec.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Once again, Tim Hancock with Stantec. You may recall at your last meeting that we presented at, I told you we were at that 30,000-foot level. So we kind of kept it pretty broad, pretty general. Well, tonight we're going to dial down, maybe around that 20,000-foot level, maybe to 15. So we're going to start seeing.
We're drilling down?
We're
Is what you're
drilling.
saying?
We're getting there. We are
All right,
getting
everybody,
there.
we're gonna
gonna
drill down a
ease
little
into
bit.
this
All
thing.
right.
So, with me is Mr. David Hyder with Financial Services. You may recall Mr. Hyder from our last meeting. Also, Ms. Kelly Westover with our Financial Services Group, as well as Mr. Jared Beck with our planning, and he'll be leading the public engagement efforts as we go forward. We're going to give you a quick recap. We think, obviously, we love the fact that there are folks here, even though I'm pretty sure they didn't show up to hear me talk. But there's also folks watching on television, so we want to do a quick recap to kind of bring everyone up to speed. I'll then turn it over to Mr. Hyder, who's going to discuss with you what utility structure options are available to you. We're going to then get into some preliminary fee estimates. What would a fee be if you were to adopt a utility? And then I'll go back and bring you up to some path forward items. So by way of recap, What are the challenges you have with your existing stormwater system? You may recall we talked a lot about everyone equates stormwater systems or stormwater maintenance with flooding, but there's a lot of other issues out there your system must perform. And you have to keep up with the rehabilitation and replacement program for your aging infrastructure. And this is where we remind everyone Bonita Springs is not brand spanking new. There are a lot of corrugated pipes that have been in the ground since the 50s that have not been repaired or replaced in some time. We also have water quality needs for the community. I don't need to educate this council on that. You are on a very strong curve addressing water quality, and we encourage you to continue that. The Imperial River Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL limits, are key, and maintaining compliance with that is key as well. And you also, at this time, have no dedicated funding for capital expenditures. Predominantly grant-based, as you may recall. There's not a dedicated funding source to address the required match for many of those grant funds. So what is a stormwater utility? And in its simplest form, a stormwater utility is not some new massive process that gets dropped on a community. It simply is an approach to organizing and funding your stormwater management with dedicated revenues generated from user fees based on how someone uses the system. Where that differs from the current method of funding is simple. Right now, the current method of funding is property taxes and gas taxes, which, if you think about it, has absolutely nothing to do with how much stormwater your property may or may not generate. So the key here is based on the use of the system. Properties are evaluated using aerial photography and GIS to determine the amount of impervious. That amount of impervious becomes the basis for how a property may or may not be assessed. By the way, it's kind of a blend of what you have out there right now with your water department, even though you don't have a public utility yourself, or solid waste is another good example. You know what you pay every year, you know how many times things get picked up, you know what services you receive, and it can be measured. The benefits of a stormwater utility, and I'll run through these fairly quickly. Number one, it becomes a dedicated, stable funding source. This is important when you're pursuing grant applications. It is fair, equitable, and transparent. Once you create a stormwater utility, the funds that go into the utility have to be used in that enterprise fund. You can't later rob them and use them for some other purpose. Not that this council would ever do that. It's based on local needs, which gives you the ability to tailor the stormwater utility not just to the needs of the city, but even needs down to a basin or neighborhood as necessary. It gives you matching funds for grants. You can fund water quality and flood protection projects. We really don't know what's coming down the road as far as water quality requirements for the city of Bonita Springs, and having a tool to address that is important. You can fund your operation and maintenance and your replacement, and you can recognize and encourage on-site management of stormwater. In other words, if they do the right thing, treat stormwater on site, you can recognize that through your system. The most important thing about a stormwater utility is it is another tool in the toolbox. What it gives government basically is one more way to fund something that you have to be doing anyway. And whether or not this body ultimately decides to simply take money, as we discussed at the last meeting, from the property tax pot and move it into a fee-based pot, or whether this is in addition to or on top of, is a policy decision for you. But in its simplest term, a stormwater utility is a tool that lets you serve the residents of your community on a targeted, specific basis in a fair and equitable manner. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Hyder, and he's going to begin that drilling down we just briefly discussed and talk to you about some of the utility structure options available to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Yes, as Tim mentioned, now we're gonna drill down. And we're gonna talk about really when we talk about a utility, there's three key considerations that we have to consider, and they're shown here as an equation. So the first question would be, what should the city fund? What stormwater activity should we fund? And that generally is defined as your level of service. And the next question would be, what unit of measure is used to account for a stormwater contribution? So in a water system, it's metered water use. That's really our divisor, so that's our fee base. And then so what we're going to provide versus our fee base gives us divided by our fee base, gives us ultimately our stormwater fee. And the question there is, how should we structure the stormwater fee? So I'm going to take you through each of these stepwise, and hopefully that helps provide some clarity. So first off is the question of what should the city fund in terms of level of service. We talked about this a little bit last time. In terms of the expenditures, Tim mentioned it a moment ago in terms of how they're currently funded. But really, there's three main categories. We have your operating expenditures on the system. It's currently funded through the general fund. It's about $600,000 per year. We also have capital maintenance, repair and replacement of the system. It's funded with gas tax, $170,000 a year. And then we have a pot, which we're calling potential capital, which currently doesn't have any funding source. This could be used for matching grants. It could be for purchase of property, things of that sort. And we put in a number there of $500,000 per year. So you could fund any number of these, any one of these expenditures from a stormwater fee. You could fund all of them, you could fund one of them, or a combination of them. And ultimately, that's one of the key considerations that we have to look at. So that's the first question, our level of service. The next question in a stormwater utility is, what's your unit of measure, your fee base? And in the state of Florida, I think I mentioned last time, there's about 180 stormwater utilities around the state. The vast majority use impervious area as their fee base, but there are other fee bases that have been used. Communities have used property value. They've actually used metered water use. Not a lot of correlation there to stormwater contribution, but it's been used. Gross area, zoning, building footprint, impervious. You could do impervious plus pervious, because pervious grass does generate some runoff. There are communities that have done that. But as we move from the bottom to the top, ultimately we're getting to more and more equity in terms of how much runoff of property generally will contribute. So property value would be less equitable than using impervious area, because there's that correlation between the contribution to the system and how much of the system they're actually using. So what we're recommending, and this is by far the most common approach, is that you use impervious area as the base. It's been shown to be the best measure of both the volume and rate of runoff coming from a property. Generally, it's easy to understand within the community. Folks understand that when you pave over a property, it's going to generate more stormwater. It's been upheld in courts throughout the United States as well as in Florida. As I'll talk about in a moment, we do have the impervious area for all parcels in the city, so we can measure and verify impervious surfaces. And so when I say impervious surfaces, I'm talking about rooftops, patios, driveways. It's essentially anything that keeps water from penetrating into the soil. So here's the preliminary impervious surface map that our GIS folks have developed for the city of Bonita. So you can see in the orange, that's all of the impervious surface area throughout the city. So we have that graphically. We can zero in on every single property and look at what their impervious surface is. As we step back from that, though, here's some of the statistics that we can pull from that data. And by land use here, you can see the various parcels or number of units associated with each of those land uses. Let me spend a little bit of time talking about low-density residential. Essentially, that's single-family homes, or it's condos that are not vertical, or it's townhomes or things of that sort that are not vertical in nature. So it's not a 30-story condo complex. That would be the low-density residential. So there's 19,000 parcels. You can see there's about 90,000 square feet of impervious surface. They make up the vast majority of impervious surface in the city of Bonita Springs. And then high-density residential would be the condo complexes, those that are vertically constructed. You have about 12,000 condo units within the city. The impervious surface associated with those condo units, including the common areas that serve those, would be about 23 million square feet, about 14%. Then commercial, industrial, governmental. So in total, you've got about 165 million square feet of impervious in the city. So the third question, in terms of now we've looked at level of service, we've looked at what the fee base is, now it's how do we structure the fee? How do we actually impose a fee? And the way to look at that typically is we want to consider a couple options. We want to have something that's fair and equitable, and we've talked about how impervious surface provides that. But we also want to make something that's administratively feasible, that you can administer. We want people to be able to understand it, not be overly complicated. And obviously, we have to have the data to be able to support it. So we take all of these factors into consideration. And then we look at the actual impervious surface. So this is the distribution of your low-density residential impervious area. So along the bottom here, we have the square footage of impervious on the parcel. On the left-hand side, we have the parcel count. And then each of those, essentially those bars represents the number of parcels that have that amount of impervious. So it's actually a very common distribution that we see here. This is very common that your impervious surface for a single-family home will be in that 3,000 to 5,000 square foot range. You do obviously have some outliers, parcels that have more impervious surface. But in terms of the average, so your average impervious surface on your single-family homes or your low-density residential is about 4,500 square feet. Your largest impervious surface, you do have a single-family home that has almost 30,000 square feet of impervious. But your average is 4,500. So when we look at fee structures, and these are preliminary, and we will talk about this more in the future, is there's a couple ways we could structure it. We could say for these properties, we're going to charge them all the same fee. We're going to take the average and say 4,500 is our 1 ERU equivalent residential unit, and that's going to, everybody in this category is going to pay that same, oops, I want to go back, is going to pay that same amount. We could put them in tiers. Some communities have put buckets of impervious to say, well, if you're in 0 to 2,000 square feet, you'd pay one fee. If you have 2,000 to 4,000, you pay another. You could do tiers, or you could do actual impervious, so the measured impervious for every single parcel. What we're preliminary recommending or considering is that you think about, given the magnitude of the fee that we're going to be talking about in a moment, is that you probably would consider for low density residential just a single fee for all single family homes. And that would potentially be at 4,500 square feet. So regardless of the impervious surface, if you're a single family home, you would pay the same stormwater fee. That keeps it simple, avoids some of the complexity, it's easy to understand, and you do have a fairly tight distribution of impervious surface when we look at low density residential. So then the next step is to look at high density residential. Again, this is condo units. Their distribution is even tighter. The average condo unit impervious surface is about 1,700 square feet. The largest is 6,500. And again, we can consider fee structure options. We could say, well, should we treat all condos the same? Given the fact that they have a pretty tight distribution, that might make sense. We could put them into tiers, which, given the distribution, really doesn't make a lot of sense. Or we could do it based on actual impervious measured. And again, a preliminary consideration for you would be to charge them all the same, so that every single high density residential unit or each condo unit would pay 0.4 ERUs, given the relationship between their impervious and what we're calling 1 ERU for a single family home. So to put this into context, let's say our fee is $10 a year for a single family home. For a condo, it would be $4 a year. Essentially, that's the relationship that we're talking about. And then finally, this is the non-residential impervious area distribution. And as we'd expect, it's very wide. It's not, there's no bell-shaped curve. There's no standard deviations that we can really look at because you have a wide distribution of commercial parcels. So your average commercial or non-residential parcel has about 46,000 square feet of impervious. Your largest has 3.5 million square feet of impervious. That's on one parcel. And so again, we can consider these options. Would it make sense to charge all non-residential the same fee? Should we have tiers, or should we do actual impervious? And given the wide distribution, what we would initially recommend is that we do it based on actual impervious. This, you could have somebody with 100 square feet of impervious and then somebody with 3 million. It wouldn't make sense to charge them the same because of that wide breadth of difference between them. And that's very common within the industry. I would say 99% of utilities, when it's non-residential, they use actual impervious as their approach. So again, initial considerations, these are open for future discussion. We want to dial them in to make sure it makes sense within the community, but initially looking at low density residential being 1 ERU, high density being 0.4 ERUs for a condo complex, and then non-residential being based on actual impervious. And so what that looks like, if we say, okay, we have the impervious area, we have the number of units, how many ERUs or billing units do we then essentially have? And what this turns into is about almost 37,000 ERUs in the system. So if we have a stormwater fee that's $1, let's say it's $1 a year, that stormwater fee would generate about $37,000. So that gives you a sense of the, within this framework, of the potential revenue that could be generated. So the next step is using that framework, we can then say, well, given these level of service options that we looked at earlier, if there's three levels there, what if we fund operating and maintenance, operating expenditures from the stormwater utility? Given the billable units that we just looked at, we're estimating that the annual fee for a single-family home or one ERU would be between $16 and $22 per year. So that's a per year number. If you wanted to just fund capital maintenance, repair and replacement, that would be $5 to $7 for a single-family home per year. And then if you wanted to fund that potential capital, which was $500,000, the fee would be $14 to $20 per year. And obviously, you could fund all of those. You could fund one of them, or any combination. But you have those options. But that gives you the sense of the fee. So we are not talking about a $100 per year fee here. The magnitude of the fees are pretty low, particularly if you remember back to our last presentation compared to Cape Coral or other Fort Myers. These fees are substantially lower than what, or Naples, what they're currently paying. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tim to wrap us up.
Can I ask a quick question? And I know you're giving just a primer, a general overview. These are nowhere near final or anything like that. But what about the context of we have already in place, and we've talked about this, Tim talked about it before, we have in place stormwater systems that are functioning throughout the city in various neighborhoods, and what credits or not are given for that.
Yeah, and that's essentially why we have that range, because we haven't defined that credit. But we could say if you're in a planned community and you manage your stormwater within that community, we could give you a credit to all the HOAs, and essentially that would reduce our billable units, but they're managing stormwater assets that you don't have to manage.
Obviously, a lot of the flooding transcends individual communities, and people need to be, you know, if
and we need to
deal with that. It transcends the individual systems.
And our analysis will look at cost of service to say, okay, what are backbone system costs? What does everybody benefit from? And then what are those local costs that we're not having to expend because a local community and HOA is taking care of their own system? And so that will be factored in.
Thank you.
Fred?
Yeah, couple questions.
Sure.
Where do trailer parks fall in this?
That's always a question, and there's really two cases. So you can have a trailer park where the land itself is all one owner, and generally the way that those are handled is because this is most likely going to be on the property tax bill, you would look at the actual impervious for that total trailer park, and then that would be what would be charged on the property tax bill. Then the owner of the trailer park could essentially divide that amongst all the units. And then there are mobile home parks that have individual ownership, and in the individual ownership, generally they would be treated like a single family home.
Okay, that's now, secondly, if you deal with like an HOA, and we have a lot of those, you've got the individual homeowner with their lot or a condo, but then you have a huge amount of interior roads and parking areas, clubhouses, and all that. So that, I'm assuming that gets a separate bill.
Yeah, generally the way it works with a condo complex is that we look at all of the impervious associated with that
And then
condo
just
complex.
divide among the
and then it's
homeowner?
divided amongst them. That's
Now,
the simplest.
the last one is, to me, the most perplexing. And in the lesson we learned from Irma, a lot of the flooding, not all of it, some of it was just too much water, but we had a lot worse flooding in some areas because communities did not maintain what they had. And it would seem to me that there should be some recognition of what they pay, because we're going to try and put their system back together.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to handle that. One would be with the credits. You could say, well, we're going to give your HOA a credit, but you're going to be subject to inspection to make sure you're actually managing your ponds. And if they're not meeting that,
No, they
that
have,
criteria.
I'm thinking of some right now that didn't do anything as of Irma yet. And they hadn't done anything for 10 or 15 years before.
Right. So this does give you a potential vehicle to enforce maintenance. of assets that you're not maintaining. Because you can argue that if they're not doing it, they lose that credit.
Okay.
And so a lot of
Good.
communities have used that as almost an enforcement mechanism
Right.
to incentivize folks to actually maintain because it's very difficult to get communities to maintain their private ponds without that enforcement ability.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other questions?
Yeah, I had
Yeah, Greg?
just one or two. So we would be the one setting forth that standard to what maintenance level through the different HOAs, if we're gonna give credits to them.
Mhm.
We're the one that's setting that standard, and we'll be the inspector and the enforcement.
Well, and this is a little bit outside my area of expertise, and we have Kelly and Tim could probably talk about it. You do have certain requirements within, I'm not thinking the correct term, with the South Florida Water Management District and permitting and things like that. So there are certain standards that they're supposed to be meeting. But yes, you could be the enforcement arm in terms of that, in terms of offering them the credits or not.
Arlene, did you? Yeah.
That builds onto the project that we presented to you at the last evening meeting, where we talked about that we are now going through each of those permitting processes and looking to determine an evaluation of where we are. And we did talk that at some point we may need to come forward with some revisions to codes so that we have the proper enforcement mechanisms within our code.
And just lastly, I know Tim had said it, and you guys said it a couple times with the, this is the 25. You know, with the numbers you've given, I know back on page 12 it was with the map. Like, that map's not really up to date because it shows like only a third of, like, let's use Bonita National is built out in it with the pervious, and I don't think it even shows Valencia Lakes or even Bonita Landings. Right there, I'm sorry, 13. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, as we get closer, we're going to take a look at a more up-to-date map to give us more.
They have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just making sure. That
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah, not going to leave anybody out.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
And so based on this update, what are the next steps? And I think the next steps are probably the most key. And that is, first and foremost, where we are on the schedule is. We're right on track, where we said we would be, and we are preparing to come back to you in January and come down a little bit to maybe that 5,000-foot level. And in January, we'll also be asking you for some direction and some clarification on what this council, from a, if you will, a straw poll standpoint, may be willing to consider going forward. And the reason is that in February, we're going to go out to the community with public workshops. And it's helpful for us to be able to speak to them with the highest degree of clarity possible when a resident says, this is a new tax. Are you going to lower my taxes? Are you going to leave them the same? Are you going to raise this? What are you going to do? So we're going to have a conversation in January and not ask you to make any final decisions, but ask for your open conversations and discussions about if this were to be implemented, how do you see it being implemented? And that does not bind you or tie your hands, but it simply helps us relate to your residents and how this can help them. I want to also point out that I want to take you back to something we said. Think about 165 million square feet of impervious. And if there's things missing on the map, make that number higher. A modern mall is 1 million square feet. Think of every time it rains, we have 165 modern malls generating stormwater runoff in the city of Bonita Springs. Every half inch, we see a volume that grows exponentially. Whether it is paid for through property taxes or through a stormwater utility, the city has an obligation to keep the public roadways clear and clean, to make sure they're accessible to the greatest degree you can, practical for fire service apparatus, EMS, sheriff's office, people who need to get to the hospital. And let's face it, it's in times of crisis that those really come to bear. So this is an obligation that you have. A stormwater utility is just a different way of addressing that obligation. And it's one that we feel is based somewhat more in equity. If I came to you and said, you know what, we all use water. So what we're going to do is we're going to base your water bill on your property value. You would probably think I'm not the brightest bear in the woods. But yet, we kind of do that for stormwater. Even though we can measure the amount of impervious, we still base what you pay for stormwater services on your property value. So we're going to present you something that we think is a more fair and equitable approach. And how you choose to use that tool and how you bring it to bear is entirely up to you. It's why you get paid the big bucks. And so, you know, we're going to throw that back on you, but we're going to try and give you as many answers to the questions that you have. So what we're going to do going forward is, at January's council meeting, we're going to bring a refined fee analysis to you. Those ranges, those goalposts, if you will, get those cleaned up a little bit. We're going to talk about property impacts. We are recommending at this stage, we're looking at taking this in what I'm going to call a two-step approach. Step one is to look at what your current funding level is, to not overreach, to not try and run before you walk here, to simply look at potentially changing the funding mechanism, and that's all. As your staff continues to work in the community on many of these locations where there are known problems, where the solutions are complex and difficult, where having a system that is established that allows you to locally solve issues, that will come in subsequent years, because there may be problems that are very localized, and having a tool that lets you address them on a local level versus having to fight through the property tax and the ad valorem budget every year to address a community or basin-based issue, I think is a tool that will help you help your citizens and your residents. So we'll be giving you those utility policy considerations. And with that, I hope that we have been more brief than we were the last time. I thank you for your attention and be happy to answer any additional questions.
Any other, Amy?
Well, I don't have a question, but I want to reiterate the point that Peter O'Flynn made. I think it's really important that we understand how the credits work, because that's the questions that I've been getting from my community that happens to be a gated community that has their own stormwater management. You know, what is it going to mean to us, and do we get credit for all these hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're already spending? So you don't have to do it now, but I think that when you give our next presentation, you have to show us how that's going to operate.
And I'd like to use that statement as an opportunity to explain something.
Mm-hmm.
Communities that manage their own stormwater. I live in a gated community.
Mm-hmm.
My association has to manage the lake. They have to clean out the catch basins. I will be honest, until I got on the board for my community, they didn't know they had to clean out the catch basins. They did not like me telling them they had to. But it is in the district permit that they were issued, that was turned over to them by the South Florida Water Management District, by the developer, that these are these maintenance activities. Many of us maintain the things that are aesthetically pleasing to us. We maintain the lake banks. We take care of the algal issues or weeds. But the things such as cleaning out catch basins, making sure streets are swept and debris is picked up, those types of things, they impact your system. So what communities do is there are two parts to water management: water quality and water quantity. And if you manage your own stormwater, that does not mean that every drop of rain that falls on your neighborhood is contained within your neighborhood. What it means is that water runs off into a system that provides pre-treatment at a measured level, and that also provides a limited amount of storage. It then discharges your site. And that's what a lot of people don't seem to understand, is water leaves your site. And when it leaves your site, it becomes someone else's problem. And that someone else, 9 times out of 10, is this body. And if those conveyance systems aren't working right, it doesn't matter what you've done inside your community, because it will have nowhere to go. So there is a degree of management you do on property, on site, and you should receive a credit for that, because that means that the city taxpayers are not coming inside the gate of your community and doing that work. Fantastic. We can look at that. But please understand, at some point that water leaves your site, and when it does, it still has to be managed, and we still have to pay attention to the nutrient loading in that water and the water quality. And that's a bigger issue, so we all have a role in this somehow, but to varying degrees. And yes, ma'am, we will be bringing recommendations to you for that consideration.
I got a question based on what Amy just said. Who's going to receive the credit? Is it going to be the individual homeowners or the community itself, or their CDD or whatever they have? Whatever they have there, who is managing it?
Typically, the way we've looked at it in most communities is if a permit is issued, it's issued to a community, if you will, or an entity. And everyone within the physical boundaries of that entity receives the credit, because they are all contributing into whatever the maintenance costs are for their community. So it's applied to everyone within the community. And David, if I've stepped outside or colored outside the lines, yeah. Whenever I start eking into the dollar sign side, I always look over my shoulder at David. So yes, it's applied to everyone within that community or entity that received the permit.
In any event, I mean, and these are just examples, but you're talking about a modest amount, and you're talking about a certain amount of balancing in that for credits. It's not like an on-off, certain people are not paying.
No, there are.
Right. Because of the point you made.
Yeah, there are a couple, there's a base level of service. We
Right.
all have a right to enjoy and expect safe passage on our public roadways. So we all have a share in that responsibility. But there are communities, and we've been made aware of some in the city of Bonita Springs, that go over and above on what they do. They may be assessing themselves for additional stormwater work. They would deserve additional consideration. And we want to give you a system that allows you to do that. And the good news is, as David mentioned, we're not talking about $150 or $200 a year, you know, at this stage. So the good news is the scale is lower, but we want to make sure the system is set up so you can be responsive going forward.
Fred, you have something?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit different than what you said, but my personal view is that the city, Matt has done an outstanding job in stormwater, quality of water as well as quantity, with the limited amount of money that we've been able to put into. So if we start this out by simply taking what we've already been spending, and that's, I think we need to take in more in that first year than just what we've been spending, because if we don't, we're just gonna have more of what we've been doing, which is great. He's squeezed everything you can get out of every dollar, but we need more dollars to squeeze, I guess, what I'm saying. So just a thought.
And I think the only thing I would, because I'm never going to get in the way of your residents and you. That's not our job. Our job is to really give you tools for consideration and then duck.
Oh, thank goodness, hallelujah. I thought that was coming. Yeah, right.
But
I think you're gonna go to Amy's community and.
Yeah, right.
But I would recommend.
Are they cleaning out the traps, Amy?
I'm not advocating that we start. way
No,
up,
sir.
Yeah.
No, sir, I
but
recognize.
a little more
Stays on
aggressive than
site.
just what we've been able to do.
And you have the ability, just as you do in every other public facility, to set the level of service. And sometimes you need to do that incrementally, and look at where you get the biggest bang for your buck. And that is, again, those policy decisions that you will be responsible for making, that Matt and the staff will bring to you. But I will tell you, there is a danger in trying to run too fast, too early.
Right.
And we just want to make sure that we do this right. We take the time to get it right, get the system set up properly, and then give you something that will last for time immemorial.
One last question, Tim. You kind of alluded to it just now about the running too fast and setting the service. Can we set the service, or can we set the standards higher than what was permitted with the Southwest Florida Water Management? Like if they said you must have a berm that's 2 foot tall around your community, because of what happened with Irma, can we now say we want a 3 foot berm? Or, you know, originally you had 12-inch culverts, we want 18-inch culverts.
I have checked carefully, and I don't find a law degree in my briefcase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer to your legal counsel with that question.
You don't have to answer or not. You can do the research. It's
No.
just
Yes, he does. Rooney, you have to answer.
Yeah, I'll give you
Sorry.
something. Let me give you something to grasp onto. But the answer is that as part of this process, we're looking at a lot of these existing permits. And I think what we're going to find, as we've already started to find, a lot of these HOAs and communities are well outside their boundaries, you know, and we are not going to be the enforcement agency for the environmental resource permits. And it's not a possibility. There are local governments that have been delegated authority. Legally, they can be transferred. But in this case, I think we'd be going to the Water Management District and asking for additional standards. When someone becomes out of compliance and they're coming back into compliance, there's an opportunity sometimes to make changes necessary to address things. But we're going to be looking at a lot of these situations, especially with the older non-performing facilities, and what can we do under the old development orders by Lee County? What conditions were there in there? Because Lee County had a stormwater management program at one point too. So there will be a lot of those conditions that were approved on some of these older developments that we'll be able to look at from a development order standpoint, say, you're not in compliance. To get back into compliance, we want you to look at these additional restrictions, especially if you're trying to get credits from us.
And that's what I mean, even on the credits, then the credits are going to go for any entity, whether it's a community or let's use a, a business park or something like that. If they're maintaining their own water and their catch basins, they'll receive the same credit.
And you have the ability
criteria.
to set that credit. You could set the bar higher. If somebody's just meeting the minimum requirements, you could set a credit at a certain percentage. If they go in above and beyond what they're required, you could set that credit higher. You have the ability to set the credit. You just have to have a logical and reasonable basis for it.
Mike, did you have, I'm sorry, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I just had one question about the fee structure. What kind of oversight or, just so people know when we're adjusting the fees? Because if we go to raise taxes, that, the trim notice gets sent out so everybody knows they can come in here and if they're upset, they can let us know about it.
Right.
But as far as adjusting these fees, what kind of oversight is there for us so that way future councils don't start jacking up this fee?
So generally, there's one of the benefits of utility is it does provide that transparency, and that as part of the budget process, you would come in and say, okay, this is what we're saying we're going to spend on stormwater, this is the revenues that we're going to generate, and this is what the fee would essentially be. So ultimately, it falls on the council to be able to set the fee at the appropriate level.
How often can it be adjusted, and what kind of
Most
notice do
communities-
we have to give?
You want to handle that one?
Typically, most communities handle it as a part of your annual budget process. So you would review and assess on an annual basis as a part of your budget process, because this is something that would in all likelihood end up on the tax bill. So annually, you'd review and assess it just like you do for many other capital facilities and fees.
It's a separate line.
It would be on your trim.
Yes.
So it will show up on the trim.
And it will specifically say stormwater utility
Yes.
as a separate line item.
As I told somebody months ago on another project, I said, wouldn't it be nice if every part of government had its own line item and you could see where everything was going, which is impractical, but at least with stormwater, it's something we can accomplish.
Okay. Council, anything else? Wonderful, thank you.
I
Arlene?
just want to advise council that Stantec will be here on January 16th. I know that is our day meeting. We've been trying to schedule these as much as possible on evening meetings, but they'll also be setting forth a series of evening workshops as well. But to keep the project going, just with the holidays and data collection, we wanted to make sure we continued with monthly reports, and the 16th was going to provide the most information to you back.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we've covered F, correct? We're now going to move on to mayor and council member items.
Presentation by the
Oh,
Alderman zoning.
that, gotcha, okay.
No, I meant zoning board. Waiting here patiently.
Mr. Kurlander, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing us, your zoning board, to participate with you tonight. After being named the chair of your zoning board, I asked the other members of the board if they would join me in asking you to participate in a day-long workshop. They agreed. Subsequently, you agreed. And on April 30th of this year, led by our outside land use attorney, David Theriak, we held such a workshop. At the conclusion of the workshop, the mayor asked me to have the zoning board prepare recommendations based upon that workshop for your consideration of those ideas that came out of that workshop. And so tonight we're here to present to you our unanimous recommendations for amending Articles 3 and 4 of the Land Development Code as they relate to planned developments. I must tell you that everything recommended here comes out of that workshop. We stayed within the four corners of that workshop. So, for example, at the workshop, there did not appear to be an appetite to have a design review board. And as a result, we do not recommend, we have no recommendation for that. wanting to stay within the parameters of what you, the policymakers, expressed at that workshop. And throughout our meetings, in going through the materials, we have tried to balance the public interest with developers' interest. Balancing the public interest with developers' interest. So why amend the code? Why do this? What are we hoping to accomplish here? First, we seek to make transparent what is now almost totally hidden from public view. Under the current law, almost everything of substance is dealt with after the zoning board hearing and after you vote on it. It's done by what we affectionately call the administrative state, out of the view of the public. So the real substance of these rezoning applications for planned developments are really done virtually in a non-transparent way. The second reason we do this is when we convene as a zoning board, we are required by law to operate as a quasi-judicial board. Quasi-judicial boards are required to make rational decisions. Rational decisions need facts. You cannot have a rational decision unless you have the facts. And that is what we're missing under the current law. Let me give you an example. Shortly after I came on the board, we heard the Horizon Park matter. 4 parcels seeking rezoning to a planned development. I only want to mention 2 of those parcels. On one, we were asked to approve what might be a hotel, or then again might be an assisted living facility. On the second parcel, we were asked to approve a yarn shop, maybe a gas station, or perhaps 35 other permitted uses. Before voting, I, being relatively new at the time, asked the question, can somebody tell me what we're voting on? Silence. I would venture a guess, not having conferred with John or my colleagues, that if I asked the question today, roughly 18 months later, I'd get the same answer. We still don't know. But imagine this. Imagine that in the first stage of a project, the developer decides, I'm going to put an assisted living facility in there. Assume that 2 years later, they've got approval. We're going to put a gas station next to that assisted living facility. To me, that's unreasonable. Remember, that developer is coming to you, asking you for permission to deviate from the law, to grant them some relief from the law. This is not a right. They're asking for relief from the law. The third reason is that our land counsel, David Theriak, has described Article 4 of our land development code as a quagmire. That, council members, is a generous appraisal. There are inconsistencies, ambiguities, duplications, and above all else, complexities when things could be much simpler. And so this evening, we are presenting to you a preliminary framework, just an outline, for planned development projects. We are recommending that we adopt a 2-step process, which will be fully described to you by John Dolmer. But let me try to give you the essence of what we're proposing. First, we allow the developer to choose whether he wants a 2-step process or a 1-step process. Should the developer want to go to step 2 initially, rather than go through 2 processes, they have the ability to do that in our plan. Second, Phase 1, the preliminary development plan, will demonstrate the character and layout of the parcel, including the approximate location, square footage, and dimension of lots and buildings, as well as other features. Architectural elevations of buildings, including heights, setbacks, and uses. Existing and proposed streets, curb cuts and alleys, existing and proposed utilities. Other requirements will be described by John. The essence of what we're doing in Phase 1 is to move forward the process. There's not much of a change in Phase 1, except to move forward what is now in the back end that is done by the staff would now be done in front of the zoning board with our recommendation coming to you for your decision. You are the deciders. You should, in our view, be the deciders. Phase 2 will require final architectural elevations and renderings. And by this we mean 60% architectural. First phase, 30%, second phase, 60%. So we're not requiring engineering drawings, we're not requiring, but you'll get a view, a feel, a really good idea as to what this is going to be and what it's not going to be. There'll be a landscaping plan, an erosion control plan, drainage, lighting, stormwater facilities, and the pertinent facility plans. We have a second committee on our board that's ready to go, headed by Richard Donnelly, to flesh out in a much more fulsome way what would be required in the second phase. But before doing that, we're coming to you tonight to ask for a preliminary approval. Why? Because at this stage, we have to go to outside counsel for help. We have avoided spending any money. From in the 6 months we've been working on this, we've spent no money, but we're going to have to start spending money here because the statutes have to be revised. We're in a difficult position. I think it's an opportunity to really do something for the community and balance the interests of the community against that of developers. I think we would be limiting speculators and promoting development with this plan. And I think it would give us a plan of best practices, transparency, and simplicity. Please remember, this is a framework only, and we have come this far without legal counsel. We have had Mr. Rooney at a zoning board meeting and at a committee meeting, so he could begin to familiarize himself with what we're doing. So should you approve this plan, the citizens will have far greater input, the process will be simplified, and as I said, we would be putting in place best practices. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, and I thank you most sincerely for this opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much, Larry. Council, questions?
Well, I'm
Amy?
just curious, this process that you're proposing, have other jurisdictions followed them? I mean,
Yes. There are a number of jurisdictions in the state of Florida, primarily on the East Coast, that follow this practice. If you took the DMZ temperature meter that they use, you know, this is super regulated, 180 degrees. This is 0 degrees, no regulation. The city of Coral Gables, the city of in the Panhandle, Seaside, would be at 180 degrees. We've positioned ourselves to be at about 90 degrees, using their scale. So yes, the answer is this is.
I think I understand the point that you're making about transparency, because in cases where we've had to make rulings on, often we don't know what I agree, you don't even know what you're voting on, because there's this big to-be-done list that comes to the staff after we make approvals for zoning changes and things like that. So I think any more information that we have, so we could really understand the basis on which we want to either agree or not agree, would be very important. So I applaud this position that you're taking.
Thank you.
Well, I'm anxious to hear it. I wanted to thank Larry and the zoning board volunteers all for months and months of hard work for the residents of the city.
The other members, but for two, are here and would like the opportunity to say a couple of words.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. Vice Chairman, you want to start?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Bob Inserpi, and I'm currently Vice Chairman of the City of Bonita Springs Zoning Board. I've been a board member, a proud board member, since Bonita Springs became a city. In all these years, we have seen many, many applications come before us. What we are now proposing is a two-step program. This program will launch us into the future and into the right direction. As a board member and as a city, we need to go and take this one step forward instead of taking one step backward. Therefore, I implore the city to accept and implement this process, and by doing so, we will be able to not only improve but also move upwards. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Jim Worcester. I'm a board member, a member of the zoning board, and I'll be quick. We need more information before we vote so we really know what we're voting on, and you guys get sort of the same conundrum when you get it after we've already passed something on to you. I won't repeat what Kurlacher and Vice Chairman came up with. I totally support it. It will not increase the total cost to the developer to do what we're doing. We're just loading some of expenses into his presentation so that we fully understand what's intended. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Craig, and I'm also a member of the Zoning Board, but a much more recent one. I've been on for less than a year. I want to speak particularly to, and use David Theriak's presentation tonight to say what my concern about this is. He gave you a presentation in which you were supposed to make a decision, and the problem with making the decision is the information you needed was not there. That's what we face all the time, and yet we're asked in the law, in fact, we're required by the law, to make a decision, a reasoned decision based on a record before us. If we don't have any record before us, how can we make a reasoned decision? So we have two choices, it seems to me, as a town. You either have to modify our law and take away the notion that we have a quasi-judicial process in which we're making reasoned decisions based on a record, and go to, I don't know, I like that guy, I don't like that guy, that's a project I don't want near me. Those are ridiculous ways to make a decision like this. You need to follow the law, and the law sets out specific things that we have to conclude have been met by the applicant. And if they don't give us any information, we can't make such an conclusion. So I'm urging you to change our process this way, and I'm sure it's not perfect yet. We looked at a lot of different towns and what they were doing and tried to come up with something that we thought would fit here. We will probably have to modify it after we use it for a while, because that's the reality of new processes. But if we do nothing, then we are holding out that we're doing something that we're not doing. And that, I think, is a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Hello again, I'm Richard Donnelly. I'm also a member, obviously, of the Zoning Commission, and I'm the Zoning Board, and I've been the fellow who's going to take this forward. I was mentioned as the subcommittee chairman. I think that, remember, this applies to plan unit developments only, and by their nature, they become very complex because they typically involve a number of different uses. So that in order to analyze those different uses, you need more information. And I think what we want to see and what you will be seeing is more architecture. You'll be seeing more site design. You'll be seeing some more engineering. But again, the levels that you will see in the different phases, we mentioned 30%, 60% drawings. These are very common benchmarks in the profession, in the engineering and in the architectural domain. You have 30% drawings to begin with. They move on to 60% drawings. The final 100% drawings will be the task of the development order people and other people on the staff. So we look forward to being able to give you folks more information, and we can make a better recommendation to you on that basis. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Are you on the board, John?
I don't remember.
Okay. All right, come on up anyway.
Starting third and batting ninth. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I think that the zoning board has expressed their opinions pretty clearly, and I will state that they have been a pleasure to work with through this process up to this point. I think a lot of the issues that they've raised are valid, and the direction that you choose to go to make whatever improvements you choose are definitely needed and appropriate. So those are my 2 cents before we get started. But they spoke with a little more emotion, but this is a little more dry in explaining where we are and where we need to go. When the city incorporated, we basically took Lee County's comprehensive plan and land development code. We adopted them. We had a certain period of time to adopt our own comprehensive plan and a certain period of time following that to adopt our own land development code. We did that. The comprehensive plan was adopted. The proposed zoning chapter that was prepared by another consultant was not passed, and we maintained that county land development code in a continued modified format. Things were tweaked and adjusted to our standards, and as councils changed, the information and priorities of those councils ebbed and flowed, and so you have a little bit of inconsistency in the process, and not only that, but a process that really wasn't yours to begin with. So as a result, as the chairman outlined, you had a workshop that was kind of the culmination of several discussions and public statements that had gone on for at least a few years to address this. And at that workshop, you allowed them to form a subcommittee to pursue this possible idea and put a few details together and come back to you for your opinion. And what they really wanted to address, the top bullet says it all. It's the type of information that was submitted with plan developments. And there has long been a concern that that information does not provide the detail, and the detail that you really are looking for is submitted later on with the development order. And what do we do to address that? And so most of the conversation in that subcommittee was really dealt with what information and what does that information look like if we were to move things forward, or at least increase the standards for what we currently require within the zoning process. And so we started to put a framework together, and we'll take a look at the framework. We'll be able to put it on the screen in a little bit. But that framework was really looking to provide that detail. And when they were outlining the balance they were looking for between the development community and the interest of this city, they looked at the possibility of 2 steps if you really weren't sure of what you really wanted to do. You didn't have the detail when you first came in the door, but you knew you wanted to pursue a general outline or a general direction. And then you could come in with your second phase and provide that additional detail when you had it, and either that phase or that lot could then be approved. If you chose and you had all of your information, then you could simply go through and complete steps 1 and 2 as one phase. Therefore, accomplishing the goal in the statement that you really didn't want to set up a process that took additional time. We'll go into that. I probably went into too much detail here, but that's where I felt moved. So now what we're looking at doing when we're addressing these things is the detail would provide through the uses, the site design, and in architectural elevations. I know that there's been significant concern, especially about the architectural elevations and what you see at the zoning stage versus what's submitted in other communities. As I said, the current process was basically Lee County's. It looks nothing like Lee County's process at this point, but actually I don't think that works to your advantage, because I think that all that means is we have adopted and modified it to the extent it's no longer recognizable. And so while I think there are moments of brilliance in that document, there are also large pieces of duplication and basically add-ons to an outdated code. So what I think that everybody has been looking for now is a process that is specific to this city, and especially to the priorities of this council. So what we're really asking for right now is, first of all, are you interested in the idea of a two-step process? Does that thought carry water with you? Are we going to proceed with this? Or if you decide that the two-step is not necessarily your cup of tea, are there other areas you wish for us to pursue? Going into this, just so council knows, this is a large endeavor. The plan development section of the code is an important section, but it's not just that section that's going to need to be addressed. There are other portions within both Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 that are going to be significantly impacted and need to be modified. Some people think it's going to take a complete rewrite of those chapters. Some people think it could be just a heavy modification. But regardless of which direction it goes, it will be a heavy lift. I'm not here to tell you that it's not necessary or it's not needed, but I will tell you that this is not just going to be a quick item that you'll see beginning of next year in its final form. It will take a little bit of time, and it will take a little bit of money to get there. So I'm waiting for my documents to show up so I can put them on the screen. Oh, there they are right there. Well, Mr. Fegan is putting that up. What we're going to do is we've kind of outlined the framework for this process, and the idea being that in that first phase, you would see more information, and we'd be nailing down some uses, and you would see some architectural renderings. But really, when you got to the final phase, they would be much more detailed. And when you see check marks and things that say preliminary and check marks that say final, know that each one of those needs to be defined. So when we say water management plan, preliminary and final, there's a lot of discussion that needs to go into it. What does a preliminary water management plan look like, and what does a final water management plan look like? Right now, all you need is a narrative submitted with your plan development. So I can simply tell you I'm going to handle things through a series of ditches and swales, which I'll send to a 2-acre lake and then discharge at a certain point. This obviously would be more information than that, but through this process, we would have to define specifically what each of those uses meant. Once it gets a little bit bigger, we can kind of go through it then. Thank you. All right, now as you look through this list, if you can bring that down just a little bit more, that's perfect. I think what you'll see in a lot of that are things that are currently required within the plan development submittal process. So there is not a whole lot in terms of topics that's going to be new. Where I think we really need to start making modifications is how those are specifically defined and remove interpretation and tradition and replace it with a specific standard. Specific standards are much easier to enforce, and they're much more transparent, and they're much easier to follow. So as you look through, down a little bit more. Yeah, that's perfect right there. So I think you get towards the bottom, these start to get to more important uses. So when you start looking at the drainage plan, when you start looking at the stormwater plan, utility plan, landscape plan. A lot of those things, I think, is where where the rubber meets the road, and that's separate from the architectural, because I look at the architectural submittals as something that we're just going to have to provide additional information for. So I don't know if council really has any specific thoughts or concerns at this point. What I was hoping for is we could have a quick discussion on what you were looking for, and based upon that direction, we can come back to you and tell you what it's going to take to get you there.
Great. Council?
I will tell you, that's a long list, but I think there's a lot of detail on it. I mean, to me, the keys are the site plan, the architecture, and the landscaping. And that is where we are nowhere near basic standards and nowhere near the communities around us. So I just went back and I took two things that we've approved. I mean, it's hard to see from people who are sitting in the seats, but this is almost a typical development plan for Bonita Springs. What you're looking at is...
Hard for me to see it, Peter.
Yeah,
no,
well,
but
there's not much to see.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
It's a box.
Right.
It's a box, all
Yep.
right? That's something we approved 2 years ago, consistent with what point Larry's making. What is it? It literally is a box with some indicated plantings. This is another one. It's a rectangle on a piece of paper. These are examples of what Estero does every day with real developers who are doing real projects. Those projects from stem to stern, from coming into approval, take no more than a year. There may be certain exceptions that take a little more. And it's, so this is a hotel. This is the Hilton Garden Inn. So, you know, in the time we've been talking about hotels, they've got 4 approved hotels, 1 built in Estero. And there's a pattern book which basically shows the site plan. Then it shows the basic, find it.
No, and just so
Yeah. it
he's
show-
flipping, they show a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Well,
and you can see it.
Yeah, and it shows the architecture, and then there are slides later that show the landscaping. It's a pattern book, and what the and these are real developers who are doing real projects. You know, because one of our concerns here, are we holding up developers? These are done all the time. They're done all the time in Naples. Slightly different process. So they come in under their system with their community development people, and they basically say, this is my project. As somebody, I think it was Larry Kurlander pointed out, we don't want to go with the standard zoning. We want the zoning changes. This is my project. It doesn't have every little detail in it. It doesn't have, there's not engineering drawings at the end, but here's what's going to look like.
But it's not a box or a square.
It's not a box or a square. So, in my view, I guess the suggestion of 2 steps is up to the developer whether they want to do 2 steps. Frankly, I would just go to what Estero has or Naples, not monkey see, monkey do, but just what developers are anxious to get into and perform on. And I think that's just, from what I understand from what Larry said and what you said, that's just a tweaking of what's in stage 1 and what's in stage 2. Because I think from what I can best gather, their stage 2 gets you to what Estero has today. And they're allowing some flexibility for, I mean, is that
Well,
fair?
Similar to, yes, sir.
Similar. So, anyhow, that's my 2 cents. I think we've just got to have reasonable expectations, no higher than those around us, that are being met all the time by quality developers.
Great, thanks. Fred, did you have something? I thought I saw your hand.
Yeah, I had a couple things. First of all, I thought originally this was for planned unit development, mixed commercial use. Now it's all, because if you're in all, that would be like if some guy that's coming in to develop a, let's say a Bonita National, you would be getting all kind of architecture on all the homes and all that before it would get approved?
What I think you would need to do, well, this topic really gained legs when we were talking about a mixed-use project. And that's where things kind of came to a head, and I think that that's why there was a main focus on that
Right.
specific zoning. I
Okay.
think if you choose to include residential projects with it, you would have to modify those standards as to what was submitted.
Here's what I would propose. If we proceed, first of all, this will cost a considerable amount of money. And one thing that some of us do, and I'll plead guilty to it, it's real easy to say, yeah, we want to move forward with something. And then after we've run up a big bill or a little bill, say, you know what, I don't think I like what we were going to do. And it doesn't, and then that money's, so what I do believe, first of all, there is a need for this. The one problem that I think has to be tackled by both Theriak and Derek, because he's got ideas on it. If you go to a one-step process, once you give that zoning, it's got uses and all that, and these guys that are coming in and saying, well, might be this or they still may do it. They may present different pictures. So we got to make sure that that's brought from this down to that. Secondly, I think that we should do this if we say we're going to proceed, much like we're doing this stormwater thing, where we're getting briefings on this, not every month, but every 2 months. So we don't wait till everything's done, and then maybe I can't support it. Maybe there's 4 people that like the concept, but we don't like the details. And this is not going to be inexpensive, so we all know we're not flush with money. We do need to come up with something, but the ones that are going to be the hardest to deal with will be the guys that got a piece of land and they want to divide it up like Horizon Park, and they got all these different uses. But once you grant them that zoning and that step 1, they got some entitlements automatically, I believe. And I think that has to be worked out very carefully between Larry's committee and Mr. Theriak and Derek, hopefully.
I think that's why they're saying that they need to go to special counsel, because those are the kinds of issues that are being brought up. But I do think that our zoning board is telling us they need this to do their job. And frankly, I think we need something like this to do the job. The details, I think we should leave up to both the professionals and the zoning board who live with this day in and day out, much more than we do.
I'll respectfully disagree with this point.
Well, let me finish,
You've
please.
got-
Fred, let her finish.
Excuse me, I listened to you. So I do think that, I'm in favor of it, and if we need some additional information that comes out of this secondary subcommittee that we want to review, I'm not against doing that, but I do think we should go forward with this.
Fred?
We've got
Thank you,
7 voting members on this council. If they go off with legal counsel and do all this, it would be a miracle if they come back where everybody agrees with the process. Conceptually, we're agreeing with it. All I'm saying is just get more deep, like this, we're at 50,000 feet. Get one at 10, 50, 20, whatever. But you don't want to wait to the end, because then even if we move forward with it, it's going to cost a lot of money to change it.
Well, I think your points about regular updates are absolutely fair.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody disagreeing on that.
No.
Well, I don't think that's what Amy said.
No, that's not what I
Amy?
said. Of course we want updates. I mean, we already talked about having a subcommittee carry forth and provide some detail to this. So, we should certainly hear what they're talking about. We're not authorizing them to go change the code at this point. I mean, we have to explore what code might need to be changed in order to go forward. And I think the presentation that John just was in the middle of doing needs a little discussion. So I think we could have some written things so we could look at it, because I can't even read that from here. So maybe those are the kinds of things that we could provide council. But I do think we need to go forward, and maybe Derek could give the committee guidance so that we don't waste money before we get too far along. I don't know how, what the steps that they're going to be taking.
Well, I want to be clear that what we're really all here talking about today is authority for the zoning board to do some more exploration on this issue.
Right.
Because what Mr. Kurlander and what John have indicated is that they're going to be, the process is pretty straightforward, but setting up the process is like setting up how we look at applications, what is required in those applications. But you may find that what you get isn't, going to change the issue, because the standards for what those applications have to have is contained within sections 3 and 4 of the LDC. Those are where the amendments are going to be made, and so we need to kind of look a little bit more holistically to figure out, is that going to be more of a planning function? Is it a legal function? Because, David may not be the person to deal with some of those issues. So I think we just want to make sure, before coming back to the council for a heavy ask on money or to engage outside planning interests or other steps that may be taken, or how far this goes beyond planned developments into other zoning areas. I think the real question is, can they move forward looking at the issue and try to answer some of those questions before that kind of money is spent? But they didn't want to even move forward a little bit until they had, a thumbs up from the council.
Sure, understood. Greg, and then Peter.
I just had a quick question. I mean, I'm all for it. I think that they should get the questions answered that they're asking. But I guess some of my question is if we need more information before a decision is rendered, do we not have that right to say, what are you really talking about? And the reason I go back to I'm asking that question, I feel that we can. I feel that the zoning board could. And I'll go back to something that was near and dear to our heart at the fire department with the Cheeky Hut. We were told, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back, asking for that ask of a change of an accessory structure. So if we were made to do that, why can't, and this board did that request of the fire department, could we not do that with applicants that come in either through the zoning or when it comes to us? All right, you're saying it could be X, Y, or Z. What's it really going to be?
Well,
Before we render a decision, we want at least a good faith of what it's going to be. Because in this day and age, with investors and so forth, they may, let's go with, what is it, the Bonita Exchange, or right there at the interchange. Rumor has it it's going to be a Starbucks in there. It may not be. It may end up being Seattle Coffee.
Right.
Does it really matter what's going to be there as long as it's going to be a coffee house?
Well,
I guess that's my question. If
I
they
think one of the
couldn't-
things that why this started with the plan development process is, unlike other zoning categories where you have a number of listed uses that could be in a commercial class 1 district, there's a whole bunch of commercial uses that anyone can come in, as long as they meet setbacks and other standards of the land development code, they can put one of those uses in that place. The plan development process, from what I've even seen, is being used as a catch-all. Design your own district. Come up with whatever you want, your own standards. So what ends up happening is you get a lot of these bubble plans that just show, this is what it's a big circle, and we may have some of these kind of uses over here, we may have some kind of uses over here, but you're also asking from all these deviations and things from the land development code. So the idea is, plus you have your concept approval at the plan development stage is good for 5 years. So that means you've got a lot of people who come in, try to entitle the property with a lot of vague uses. They may have told you and the public that we're gonna have a coffee shop and all these other things, a couple out parcels, but then 4 years later, the property's changed hands 2 times and it's redeveloped in an entirely different way because the plan was not tight enough to control that. So some of the things we've talked about is having maybe a 1 year with the concept approval, but then you gotta start down the path of giving us the details. And you can change it, but you may have to restart the process. So there's a level of finality, I think, on the plan development side that the zoning board is looking for. They want to see what it's going to look like. But involved in that process is we have criteria for rezonings, we have criteria for special exceptions and variances we're going to deal with later. These criteria are pretty vague. So we're talking about possibly also updating those criteria to say, is it the highest and best use? Is maybe a generic criteria. Well, what does that really mean? So giving some additional details so that you're giving direction from a policy level, what kind of projects you'd like to see come in and use this flexible process, and then the zoning board and yourselves have a lot more detail to make a decision on that's going to last for many years before anything turns dirt.
Can I make a suggestion, which is, and I think it's great to have the zoning board go and come back, but I think it'd be worthwhile for them to sit down with, I'm sure she'd be willing to, and John, somebody like a Mary Gibbs at Estero, and lay out what they do, because this is what developers expect to see there, and they're getting deals done. In other words, part of what I'm thinking is to make it easier for developers, it would be better if we were comfortable with it, if we were closer to our neighbor communities, rather than it's kind of like, I'm going to Alaska, I got to figure out how they do things, or Nebraska, how they do things. In other words, if we have some similarity with processes around us, whether it's Naples, Collier, or Estero, that work for developers, try to do something similar to make the life of developers easier. And in return for that, they're going to get, and we're going to get, more clarity on what they're proposing for a zoning change. And, we could still end up with the 2 steps, but, and to me, it comes back to architectural, landscaping, and site plan. And there's, the rest of it, I'm not minimizing them, but there are a lot of details. I don't think the city council really needs to get into the water flows and all of that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Fred.
I like what Councilman O'Flynn is saying. I would add one thing. If, when we're looking at what Estero and Naples and Collier do, focus, what do they do with what you call situations like Horizon Park, where a guy's got a strip of land, he wants zoning, he's a speculator.
Right.
They don't have solid clients, they got hopeful clients, you might say.
Right.
Because that's the place we have the biggest problem.
So a great example of that, a fair point, and a great example of that in Estero was Coconut Point.
Yeah.
So Estero didn't exist. The ECCL worked with Lee County to put together a bunch of standards, and they were basic design standards, and it affected what Coconut Point looks like today. Mm. They didn't say, this is for Michael Kors, this is for some bar they have up there, that type of thing. Right. And to answer your or reflect on the other question you had, which I think was a good one, on, not that the other ones weren't,
yeah.
on...
no, the other ones weren't.
Yeah, on the Bonita National example. I actually asked Mary Gibbs about that at some point, and they don't get into each house and what every house looks like. And there's a particular focus on what it looks like from the street view, and then some basic ideas inside. Right. They're not getting into the weeds of as far as I understand it.
Yeah.
Well, sorry.
Just to also comment on Peter's point, it gives the council clarity, but it also gives the developer clarity. And I'd like a checklist. All right, I've got all my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and then I go to the zoning committee. They may say, all right, tweak this and come back, but it gives everybody standards and a framework to work within.
And one other thing, to a point Derek was making, I'd actually disagree a little bit. Because in Estero, they know exactly what they're getting, the right to do that is much longer. Makes sense. In other words, the guy says, I'm going to put this garden in at Coconut Point. I'm telling you what it's going to look like. I'm going to tell you what the architecture is. If it takes them a little longer to do it, fine. The reason we have, in my view, the problem with the extended rights is we don't know what he's doing. So it's just a blank check for so many years. They're basically finding out what they're getting.
Thanks, Peter. Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to bring in developers and stakeholders into this earlier the better, see what they have to say about it. A little concerned about the two-step process, just adding time. I know a lot of stuff staff kind of handles after the fact, and staff can be very timely, with moving things around, having to reschedule it to come before us or zoning board again. That just adds more time. And the other thing is, if they do need to seek counsel, why do we need outside special counsel? We have Derek and his firm. Don't they have enough expertise to help with this, so that way we're not running, the meter up with our more expensive special counsel?
Yes, Larry.
The reason we need outside counsel, Councilman Gibson, is because he has spent the better part of a year and a half, almost 2 years now, familiarizing himself with the code. That is sunk capital on behalf of the city council. With respect to Derek, I don't. I served on the committee that recommended his firm, and we have a lot of confidence in him. But they've got to start from the beginning and familiarize themselves, and that's going to burn a lot of dollars.
And you agree with that?
And
I
that-
do.
Okay.
And that's that's why. The first part of your question,
I thought you knew everything, Derek.
the two-step, can actually be shorter. You could put a time frame. Let's just take the most recent project we opposed, we approved, which was the old 41.
East Terry Assembly?
That's
Terry Street.
Terry Street Assembly. 3 years behind closed doors. If we put time frames on each phase of the process, we will not only shorten the process, we will put a certain element of certainty in there that's currently lacking. So I think that it works the other way, respectfully, that we can shorten the process by putting time frames so that you have to file an application. After that, you have to do certain things. Put a time frame on each of them. Give the developer some flexibility if they need more time, but it's not going to go on forever. And at some point, you call the question. You shorten the process, you make it simpler for everybody. It is more helpful to developers to bring that certainty into the process. My experience in the practice of law representing developers is they like the certainty. 3 years, the Terry Street assemblage.
Well,
Thank you.
Like I said, I'd just like to bring in the stakeholders ahead of time, make sure they buy into this also. I don't want it to be totally one-sided.
Well,
Yeah.
one last point, and that is, and I think Derek would say that there's a lot of truth what I'm saying. On the mixed use, the problem you got if you don't have exactly what each parcel is going to be in that step one, you grant that zoning, that guy's got a whole lot of entitlements that the law is behind him on. Am I not wrong?
Well, and I want to be clear, because we're sort of, based on Mr. O'Flynn's comments about disagreeing, we are also conflating a lot of issues between the approval of a planned development at this point and the actual issuance to the development order, and what happens between stage 1 and stage 2. Now, assuming that we do not go with basically you're putting the same level of detail at stage 1 and stage 2, well, under Mr. Kurlander's example, you would just come in a single stage approval. But to the extent a stage 1 approval is more of a conceptual plan where I want to establish these uses, densities, et cetera. And stage 2, when you can actually pull a development permit, would have all that detail. I think that you do want to consider how much time you're giving. And for one reason, you may change codes or processes in the middle, and where does that vest for that person? But if they were to change their uses under Florida law between stage 1 and stage 2, say we asked for this much square footage of this use and this much square foot of this other use, but during the process we realized, we did the calculations, we could actually add more uses, and we want to do that with some out parcels or something to that extent, they would have to restart the process. And I think that's what you want to be able to do, so that there's clarity throughout that process. Now, they could still come in at that second stage with everything, just as the concept is you could do all this in one shot if you wanted to. But you'd have to have everything ready to go, and that's the risk that the developer takes in following the regulations to say that I've checked every box, I feel comfortable moving forward. If they don't want to do that and they want to move forward on a conceptual basis, and then before they spend the money for stage 2, then that's what's appropriate. They come in, they say, these are the uses we want to look at. The council knows generally what would be approved there, but the details, what the public will see when it's constructed, maybe not the actual vendors, but what businesses will be in there, what their connections are going to be, making sure that all the traffic impacts are appropriately detailed, what the architectural standards are going to be, if they're going to be a pattern book for a big project like a Coconut Point level deal. All of that would be dealt with at stage 2, and that's appropriate, because they've already got some level of approval, they feel comfortable moving forward, and that is fairly consistent with what is approved in Estera, where they have overlays and other regulations. I will, I'm doing work in Estera as well, but I will tell you that they are dealing with a lot of same land development code provisions you have, because their code came from Lee County, and they're working on updating it. But they have overlays, they have spent time doing the visioning to move forward. You are doing that now, and what the zoning board's asking for is to allow them to continue to go on that process.
Larry, do you think it'd be reasonable to take a look at what Estero does? Would Larry go? Yes. And particularly with respect to Fred's point about, what if you have a guy who's doing different things, type of thing, just see how they do it. I just think and I know the zoning board's put a lot of work into this, if we've got a clock that ticks up there and we could somehow emulate it, it's one that works for developers, at least real developers, not a bunch of speculators. Proof's in the pudding as far as I'm concerned. And then we can think about, kind of think about a final product and then back off and see if you want a stage 1 and 2 with respect to that final product. Does that make sense? So I'd like to suggest that as a direction.
Okay. Council? Any other questions?
Would that be a come back and tell us what you found out?
Yeah, and come back and tell us what you found out. Okay. Yeah. You gotta. Yeah.
When you talk about stakeholders in this, I think it's important to keep in mind that when we're making decisions about changes in the law as it exists, and that's what we're doing when people come to us with this, they're not wanting to do what the law already tells them they can do with their property. They're wanting to do something else. And there are two groups that are stakeholders in this. One is the developer who wants to do it, and the other is the public interest or the public. And I think when we let people come forward with these boxes, it's impossible for the public to be able to make rational input onto it. So we need to make more specificity up at a time when the public can have input, not when it moves into the staff's offices where the public just never goes. Most of them don't even know that would be where to go. So I would like us to put emphasis on both sides of that. We're not only trying to help the developer, but we're trying to help the public who you all represent. So just a little underline.
Thank you, Barbara. Council, anything else? John?
Just whenever you are finished with your discussion, I know there's a few members from the public that wanted to at least make a few comments.
Okay, great. I think that's probably a good time.
Were there any more questions?
Any more questions, Council? I didn't think so. Okay, great. Members of the public? Michael, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name's Michael Maurer. I'm a commercial real estate broker based here in Bonita. I represent a number of different stakeholders. I'd like to make a couple of points about what I'm hearing and what's being proposed. I guess in general, I want to caution council and I want to caution the zoning board that there needs to be separation of zoning and development order. And what I'm hearing is that the zoning board wants to bleed into the scope and activities of issuing a development order. When Chairman Kurlander said that things are hidden, I would like to know what things in the scope of a zoning board or a zoning resolution are being hidden from the public. When you have a zoning resolution, you have a detailed list of permitted uses that you can either vote yea or nay on. you want a drugstore there, you can say yes. In addition to that, in a master development, you can even specify where that drugstore can go within that development. Can it go along Bonita Beach Road? Can it go back against Hunter's Ridge? Or can it only go in one spot? You have total buildable square feet calculations, whether it's commercial space. You have maximum sizes of houses or minimum sizes of houses, maximum number of hotel doors or keys. You've got parking requirements in those zoning resolutions. You've got open space requirements in those zoning resolutions. You've got building setbacks. You've got minimum lot size requirements. You've got building height restrictions. You've got access points, ingress, egress determinations, preliminary site plans, landscape buffering is in a zoning resolution, noise and lighting restrictions, walling, screening, buffering, and you have a master concept plan. It's not just a one-page document with a square. A PD zoning resolution is 30, 40 pages long with very detailed information about what that developer can do as far as the horizontal infrastructure of the park, where the lake's going to go, what the landscaping is going to look like, what the architectural requirements are going to be. The land development code already has written into it all the architectural standards that a builder has to adhere to, whether it's Mediterranean, whether it's Key West, whether it's contemporary. Those restrictions are already in there and already have to be followed. You don't have to rewrite what the architecture is going to be. You have a architectural review by the city architect. There has to be some clarity when you go in front of the zoning board as far as what your park's going to look like with palm trees and oaks, and I agree the landscape buffering is very important. A lot of these master plan commercial activity centers already are subject to overlays, particularly the Bonita Beach Road corridor vision study overlay that lays out these restrictions already. There has to be some clarity, but I believe there's already enough clarity and there's enough items that the zoning board puts into the zoning resolution that you're going to know exactly as it pertains to zoning rights. The pattern books, great idea. Love the pattern books. Those pattern books, however, are utilized after zoning. Okay, I represent two different landholders in Estero with properties that are already zoned and entitled with lists of uses, setback requirements, height restrictions, total buildable square feet. Before I go to pull my DO, I have to submit the pattern book to the neighborhood meetings, to staff, and then a final sign-off by the village council. I think that's a great idea. But to confuse and to commingle zoning with what happens at the development order level, I think is a severe mistake, and here's why. You will no longer have any developer take on any risk for a master plan commercial park if he doesn't have the ability to go in and put in roads, put in the improvements, and then open to the general commercial development world and saying, guys, we have fully shovel-ready dirt. Here's our list of permitted uses. Come on in. You can put your building up in 6 to 9 months. If you go to this two-step process, what I fear will happen is that you won't have any more master plan parks because a developer will not take on the risk in terms of time or money if you have this quasi set of uses that you say, yeah, you can do it, maybe, kind of, sort of, but we want you to go through the process one more time to see if we can put a gas station on the corner, or if we can put a hotel here, if we can put a grocery store here. The zoning and the development order components have to remain separate. And the reason is that to get your zoning, you have to have a land use attorney, you gotta have traffic, but it's not an excessive amount of cost. You're maybe talking $30,000, $40,000 to go through and get a zoning resolution.
Yeah, that's true.
In order to get a development order issued, you have to have engineering drawings, you have to have architectural drawings, you have to have traffic impact statements. That's about $150,000 to $200,000 depending on the size of the development. What I'm seeing now is that the zoning component wants to take some of the requirements of what happens at DO level and pull some of those dollars into the zoning phase of a development. And what I fear is that it's going to eliminate the risk taking. It's going to eliminate developers in creating master planned activity centers, which I think the council wants, because we want to have interconnectivity. We want to have things that with traffic flow, particularly around the interstate and 41, so that it's a master plan activity center. We can't predict exactly where everything's going to go, but we can agree to say, all right, if there's a gas station, it can only go in these 4 lots where it makes the most sense. We have overlays within the parks. I agree that that's very smart, but that could still be done at the zoning board level without having to change the current processes. I can't see a scenario whereby a developer would ever select under this 2-step process. When would he ever select to go down Route 1? What does it benefit him? You can't build anything. You can't do anything. You still have to go through round 2. So if I'm a developer, I'm going to wait until I have a user in hand to go through the second round simultaneous to get my permanent rights with my development order simultaneously. What happens with the rest of the land, though? Take Horizon Park. Say he does have a hotel. What's he supposed to do with the rest of the land? Leave it bare? Because you're telling him that you don't know what's going to happen in the lots out front. So why would he ever build the roads or the infrastructure out front? So now you're putting the cart before the horse, and I fear that we need to keep zoning, keep the DO. Yes, there needs to be more transparency as far as landscaping, site plan, traffic. Yes, I agree with that. But to try to pull so much requirements into that zoning phase is going to result in developers not taking risk, and I think that some of the larger tracts will never be developed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Wayne Arnold. I'm a local land planner, and all I wanted to weigh in, first time I'm hearing the conversation about this 2-step process, and I agree with a lot of what Mr. O'Flynn says. I think we've got examples in Naples, Estero that work well, and I think we can take those elements that we like from those and maybe make those Bonitas, because I think that the 2-step process, a lot of what Mike just said is true. I don't think there's going to be a risk taker out there who's going to put in infrastructure if you don't have an end user. So I think we have to find a happy medium. The pattern books, mixed bag and Estero, I've worked on both. But the hotel example, for instance, it came out of a conceptual plan that was approved for the Coconut Point Mall, and that was a fairly conceptualized plan. They came back and had to amend it for a couple of different reasons, but then they were subject to showing some of these requirements. But I think that's fair game. City of Naples, you show more architectural detail than is required here. So, I mean, there's a happy medium, and I guess that's what I would say. Let's find the happy medium. And the other thing that I thought of is you all have a lot of balls in the air right now. You have the Donnelly team looking at some things. You have some other things going on Old 41. You have some things on Bonita Beach Road. I'm just not sure now's exactly the time to modify the process when these other consulting teams may be coming forward with suggestions that would warrant even a different process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members? The public? Welcome. How are you? Nice to see you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, my name is Sandy Gibbons. I am not a developer. I have absolutely no experience whatsoever in large tract development. But it seems to me that you have a committee that's very hardworking that is begging you for direction. I don't see how you can turn them down and expect them to do their jobs. The other point is it occurs to me that you're in the process of trying to do something to control the water situation in Bonita. How can you go forward with that without knowing what people want to develop? To me, it's very common sense, and I don't understand what could possibly be wrong with our community having standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the public?
Mr. Mayor, City Council representatives, I'm Chris Corey, President of Bonita Bay. I came here because I've worked with Larry for a long time, and I have understood some of the frustrations that he's dealt with respect to zoning. I think it comes down fairly simple to the fact that when a project is undertaken, I think the residents of the city, I think the City Council, we want the best project that we can get to go on a parcel of ground. And I think what Larry's outlined in terms of what's needed to move that process forward is reasonable. And I think the people in Bonita Bay and all of Bonita Springs would back his recommendation to make these changes so that we know we're getting all we can get when these projects are done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Anybody else? Ben, welcome.
Ben Hershenson, President of Fairwinds HOA. I just want to add my comments here, and as others have just recently expressed, I'm not a developer. I'm just a simple little homeowner who's concerned about what goes on in my area as well as the rest of the city. When you have a group of, and everybody has to understand, the zoning board and all the other committees and boards are all volunteers. You know, they don't do this because, you know, they basically have just all the time in the world. They have to make time to do it. And, you know, sometimes I ask myself, why do I do what I do? I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. But the point is, you have to be passionate about something once in a while. How can you take a committee such as the zoning board? I don't know how they learn all those regulations. I wouldn't even know where to begin. It probably would take me a year and a half to even get through a third of them to understand what they're all about. To not say yes, to not agree with what this recommendation is from the zoning board, I can't see a reason to say no. To come up with reasons or to create reasons, well, this might not work, this might cost too much money, I understand all those issues. But for heaven's sakes, they're coming up with a plan. I would hope that, that you folks, the city council, will support them. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody else? Council, what's your pleasure? Oh, John Delmore. Oh, it's
I
John
just wanted
Delmore.
to add one quick thing.
It's John.
If it is your pleasure, we will have those discussions with Estero and the City of Naples immediately and then come back to you with some additional information, and you can maybe provide additional direction at that point, if that would make you more comfortable.
Makes sense to me.
Good.
And I think, you know, the term happy medium came up. I think, you know, let's get something everybody can be happy with.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like to say I really appreciate Wayne Arnold's comments here tonight. He's a guy who's done a lot of advice for developers all over our region, successful developments, and I really appreciate his comments.
Great.
I'd like to thank the zoning board for the great job they're doing, and that you guys are still sitting here.
Yeah. And I hope the Kurlander family had a great Thanksgiving in New York City. Yeah.
He's not. His wife broke her arm.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Larry knows what I'm talking about. Larry was flipping the bill for dinner, buddy, so for about 50 people. So I'm sorry to hear that about your wife. Zoning board, everybody, thank you very, very much for your efforts, and we will get to where we need to get to. We always do. Thank you very much. Arlene, what's next?
We'll be moving on to mayor and council items.
Okay. We're going to start with item A, which is a discussion. I got an email, and I think everybody saw it. You know, and Matt, I know you and I discussed this for a little bit. The fountain at Lyle's Plaza, and this is Green Sheet 18-12401. Look, it's a beautiful plaza. It's not working. And that is a result of Hurricane Irma, right, Mac? Because the water level came up high, and because it's a fountain, help me out here. The water goes up, comes down, but in the process messed up the fountain.
I don't recall talking to you, Mr. Mayor, about it, but yes, from what I understand, the volume of water from the storm did overtake the pump, and there was a pump failure with
I
the
thought
fountain.
it was you. Perhaps it wasn't. I mean, there's a pump that will work when it goes up. There's a pump when it'll work when it goes down, whatever that's called.
There's an underground pump
Right.
that was flooded out during Hurricane Irma. Our Parks and Recreation Director has been working in conversations with FEMA that we could possibly mitigate the pump. The original plan was to just replace the pump as is, but if there's a possibility to use those FEMA funds to have a better pump system, which is above ground, which would prevent future mishaps of this type, that's what we're working towards. There was originally 3 quotes received, which were over the authorization amount of sealed bids. We then went back for a sealed bid that came up much higher than the original thoughts of that. So we're going back out with some conversations with folks to continue to see if we can get a more reasonable cost in that process. And additionally, we're continuing conversations with FEMA so that we can have this project funded through that. In the interim, the fountain was drained and cleaned in between, and we've provided a photograph of that as well, and we'll continue to maintain it as best we can as well.
Right. Council?
I
Amy.
just want to make a statement. I do think that if it's possible to provide some resiliency to that fountain, that would be good. And I'm not 100% sure I understood your comments that you transmitted to us, but is it possible that FEMA could pay for the resiliency?
Correct.
Okay.
So there's
I would
several processes with FEMA. If you can demonstrate that an improvement needs to be made, and so that you can harden the infrastructure so that it could prevent future flooding, that's what the process we're working towards.
So I would prefer, that we not go to that, just a Band-Aid kind of approach, and I'd be willing to let it not have water on it until we could go through all the other process, but to focus on the resiliency.
Okay. Anybody else? Council?
If anybody told me I'd be talking about resilient fountains a few years ago, I would.
No, motors.
Resilient.
Mike?
Yeah, well, I know that the bids came back too high. If they don't come down to the right area, how long did the previous pump, has that been there since the fountain's been there? Has it been needed to be replaced multiple times?
I think there was some repair work in between, but I believe it is the original pump system. I don't think
I mean, that's a pretty good long run. If it's crazy expensive to go resilient, I mean, how often do we get floods that come up that high and knock out the pump? So
I think what we're looking to do is making sure that it can be properly funded by FEMA and that we've provided the proper procurement process for that within the bid structures. I think what the original quotes were higher than what we could do just written quotes for. We needed to have the sealed bids, and that's what's prolonged the process.
yeah, I'm just looking at more of a timeline thing. If it's going to take forever to get the better system, I'd rather go with what we had before. So.
Well, that and the fact that if FEMA doesn't pay for it, what are we just going to abandon the fountain? We're going to have to repair it anyway. So let's get it repaired and hope that FEMA does it. I mean, it goes back to we cleared the roads. We didn't know how much FEMA was going to pay when we cleared all the debris. I mean, anything that was done at the park, anything that was damaged, if it needed to be repaired, we got it repaired. Hopefully FEMA's going to do it. I mean, it's just one of those things. I don't want to see the fountain go into disarray and not be used for another year. It's already been over a year now.
Matt?
No, I think, just to echo what Arlene had said, they quoted it. We experience this in the public works side a lot, where you go quote work and you find out you're over the threshold. We actually have a FEMA project like this. And then I think what happened in this case is you go out to bid, and you didn't get a lot of respondents, and they were much further beyond the scope than they had anticipated. But you rebid it, and to your point, yes, you have to repair it.
What are we doing?
So Nicole was not able to be here, but she's monitoring us from outside, and she just wanted to make sure there has been several issues before previously with this current pump. So if we have an opportunity to upgrade the pump to a better system, that would be staff's recommendation.
Okay.
As long as we can find the proper funding through FEMA.
It comes down to funding through FEMA, what they'll reimburse.
Right. Okay.
So if you run into a problem, you'll come back and say, we're going to repair it.
Absolutely. If we run into a problem, we're not able to receive the resiliency funding from FEMA, we would go back to fixing it at the current rate, the current standard.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Council? Okay. Yeah. Mike?
Proceed.
Do we have an idea on what kind of timeline for FEMA?
Well, for FEMA, all projects have to be complete by March. So we've got and actually Carly's is going to be our project coordinator on that. She's tracking each of our projects, and we have strict timelines from FEMA of when we have to have everything programmed. So we're working on making sure we're having everything timely resolved so that we get full reimbursement.
Well, if it's got to be done by then, they'll give us an idea ahead of time if it's something they would cover, or how's
Correct.
that? Okay. When do we expect that?
We're in discussions on the technicalities of what constitutes the resiliency, if they'll reimburse for the new pump versus if it has to be what it was before the hurricane.
Let them do their work.
Yeah, I guess my final comment is if this would have happened 2 weeks before with the flood that was not under FEMA, under Irma, what would we be doing today? Would we go into the resiliency pump, or would we fix the one we have? And let's move forward with it in a timely manner, to Mike's thing, so.
I think at that point, if we had flooded out the system, depending on the amount of repair work, we'd bring you to the two alternatives and ask for direction.
Right.
If it was a certain, depending on the threshold of the cost.
All right, just one last quick question, and be probably to Matt. And it's, well, what I'm getting at is,
Make it quick.
it's gonna be real quick. If, that's okay. Some of us worked all day too, so. Point being is if FEMA's gonna reimburse us, are they gonna give us reimbursement what we do? Well, what am I getting at is they're gonna pay for the pump. If they tell us they're gonna pay for the pump, can we use that money to upgrade?
FEMA gets very challenging when you start talking about replacing things beyond what the existing condition was. And that's part of the discussion that Carly's
All right.
holding with Nicole and FEMA. And you basically have to get pre-authorization, and they have a pretty high threshold. It sounds like they've made some inroads. I'm not intimately familiar, but they can be a challenge.
That's the process we're in now, is in confirming the amount they will fund so that we can make sure that's consistent with the bid process.
Thank you. Council, anything else here? Okay, dynamite. We're going to move on to the discussion on information received, that I received from the Mayor of St. Augustine on the Florida Resilient Coastlines Program. And I don't have that information in front of me, but Matt or Arlene, could you sum that up kind of quickly?
So the information you received a letter from the mayor of the city of St. Augustine discussing a pilot program that they have participated in, and I believe also that the city of Clearwater participated and Escambia County. From what I can gather, there was some support, and I don't know whether that was financial support or staff support, from a group, the Community Resilience Initiative Program. And they also worked with DEP and the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. Our city clerk is investigating more information of records from St. Augustine. Staff's only concern is that we do have many strategic priorities that we're working on right now. Although sea level rise, can contribute to flooding issues, we do have a pretty stacked list of projects that we're working on as far as our flood mitigation programs, our FEMA programs. And although this is a very interesting and important role, we just want to make sure that we're staying focused on the strategic priorities that you've already identified for us to work on.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you. And now we're up to our addendum, a discussion on the Big Carlos Bridge Project Development Environmental PD&E Study. Councilwoman Carumba, and this is Green Sheet 18120411.
Where do I begin? We've been given, we forwarded quite a bit of information to you, including the presentation that was made to the Board of County Commissioners in regard to the alternatives for the Big Carlos Bridge. And I have to start by saying that I have some concern that the timing of when we were informed about this did not allow us to engage in at least me, engage in a substantive way with some of the details here. And so what I'm going to tell you here is what I was able to garner from watching the video of the Board of County Commissioners, the video of the Fort Myers Beach Council meeting where they decided to send the letter to them, reviewing the material that was given to us by Mr. Stephen LaBelle, who was kind enough to do some calculations on the present value of the costs, and to listen, to react to some of the comments that came out of the Board of County Commissioners. First of all, I would like to say that on behalf of, this bridge is going to be in my district, but that makes no difference because my comments has to do with what I believe can affect the entire community, because we have spent a lot of time and effort with designs, all kinds of consultants, to try to maintain a certain character in Bonita Springs. We even have it on our thing, small town charm, big bright future. Look at our comprehensive plan. We have things that say things like human scale. This is what we have been told by our communities they want from Bonita Springs. We have a vision of it. And I contend that one of the concerns that I have about having a high-span bridge is that it will affect the nature of our beach community, the Big Hickory Island, Little Hickory Island. There's a certain atmosphere there. It's a deed-restricted community, and what's wonderful about Bonita is that we have these different corridors, kind of so to speak. So when we think of the beach, it has a certain flavor, even though there's a lot of building there. And I think that we as a community have made a lot of effort to keep those kinds of flavors that we have within our community. So I think we're not just looking at a few mid-rise communities that are going to be looking at the bridge, which certainly, if I was on the 7th floor of one of these high rises and we were suggesting that we're going from 24 feet to 60 feet, I would complain about it. But we had friends of Lover's Key that came out and said they have concern about the effect on the entrances to a great asset that we have there. So there's lots of reasons why, from an aesthetic and from a community vision point of view, I think that I personally would be against a high-span bridge. I also think that when we look at the and we're all, let's not spend any money, let's be really careful, let's be very economical about things. But from the beginning, I had some concerns about how the calculations were done in regard to both the initial costs and the operation and maintenance expenses that were projected out for 75 years. I don't know how you do these kinds of projects, but with my experience from finance, when we do discounted cash flow, we do present value. And the reason why we do present value is when people talk about a cost that's out 75 years, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for little items that conceptually one can't have. So if you bring back to present value costs, we could talk about that. We could say, what does it cost in today's dollars with today's revenues and today's population? How does that cost affect us? So I believe that the future value calculations, and this is a technical thing that I haven't had time to fully explore, but I think that it biases the decision-making on an economic basis to put a higher weight on costs and expenses that are out in the out years. Whereas if you do present value, and you could say there is a difference between the 24-foot bascule bridge versus the high span bridge, and that difference is not $80 million. It's closer to maybe $12 million, depending if you're just looking at costs, or $22 million. And then the way to look at that is, well, what does it cost the people of Lee County to pay for that bridge? And I think a per person calculation is important. And if you look at the material that I sent you, we're talking about 12 cents per person in today's population, or depending on how you look at it, maybe 30 cents per year. So if we in Bonita Springs are trying to hold on to the nature of our community, I'm not sure that we're asking too much for Lee County residents to help us and spend 12 or 30 cents per year to give us a bridge that better suits us, that might have some navigational improvements, because if you have a bascule bridge, all the boats can go through. You don't have to call, you don't have to say sailboats that are have a 60-foot route. So, and from a safety point of view, they have said that from an evacuation point of view, a bascule bridge or a high-rise bridge would be the same. And finally, I'm very concerned about the Sun Trail, because maybe if you're 18 years old, you could go up a 5 or 6 degree elevation in there. But if I'm riding on that, I want to do it on 3%, So I think, again, we have the opportunity to ask the Board of County Commissioners to think of other things besides just the bottom line, which is, I think, what they focused on. And to note that we're not just trying to protect a few residents that happen to be looking at this bridge. There are many other aspects that I think we could explore. And I would ask that the council either, will probably suggest that they don't make the final decision by December 18th, which is their next meeting, which doesn't give people a chance to really give their opinion. There's a lot difference between having public input on a specific recommendation than having all recommendations put out and say we can do A, B, or C. And we haven't been, I don't think we've given an opportunity, and I think that's not the right way to do it. So I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but if you were able to read some of this information, we could have an hours of discussion on all these details. And that's one of the reasons why being noticed on Friday, having the Board of County Commissioner make a decision, or having a presentation on Tuesday and then having our meeting on Wednesday, we just don't have a time to do it. And finally, I have to just say that I am a little disappointed that the staff outreach to Lee County, when we asked to have Lee County come to talk to the council so we could have a really good discussion on this specific project rather than having to do it sort of in a fast way. It's really a disappointment.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Greg?
No, I kind of feel the same way as Amy. As we all feel about the county most of the time, it just seems like they're going to do what they're going to do, and I just think we need to put the letter out there and let them know how we feel about it. I mean, whether it's this bridge or any other thing, whether it's the library, how long it take us to the library. I just think that we need to make our voices heard. And, you know, the bridge is the bridge is going to be there for 75 years. We don't need to make a rush to judgment in 2 weeks, especially since we haven't been able to discuss it at all and what the impacts are. So I feel the same way. I don't think there should be a quick rush to make a decision, especially when we've only had realistically, they've given us their opinion now. So let's go back and look at their opinion and really analyze it. And I do agree with Amy. No one knows what 75 years is going to be for a bridge tender, how much he's going to get paid there. So to speculate that it's going to be $175,000 a year for that guy to sit there from 8 to 5 and open the bridge is ludicrous. So,
thanks. Laura?
I concur with both Greg and Amy.
Okay. Pete?
So do I, absolutely.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm for the lower bridge or maybe even a ferry. Let's just get rid of the bridge.
There you go.
What did he say?
A ferry. Get rid of the bridge.
Okay.
Fred?
No, I agree. I think that we need to write the letter, but I think it shouldn't be a rip-roaring letter. I think you can make the points that Amy brought up in a nice, professional way.
Right.
And get it up there and let them know that it's coming.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the points can be made in a professional and firm manner without being confrontational. I mean,
Right.
certainly, that's not what any of us want anyway, but
Right.
like I said, I can always say things the wrong way to make the point, but nor will I sign a letter like that. So I think the point's well taken.
And I just want to make one point, because I should have said this initially, but was very pleased with the comments by Commissioner Kiker. I think he was alluding to this present value versus future value thing. I'm not sure he explained exactly correctly there, but he is, I think, at least receptive to looking at it from a technical and academic arithmetic kind of way, which is closer to what I'm suggesting. But he also was very receptive to the idea that there are other considerations besides just cost, safety, and usage. And there's 4 million trips over that bridge every year, and it's not just, it's not certainly not only Bonita Springs residents that go that way. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that this has to be addressed to all the community, not just a few residents. And I would not support this if it were just to affect the few residents that are looking at the bridge. It's not that at all. There's a lot different in the aesthetic of a high-span bridge, and I mean, we see it up, what they've done in Fort Myers, and it's not quite as bad as the flyover, but it's similar. It's sort of the same kind of concept there, where you change the entire community. So we as a community, I think, have a right to say, we want the beach area to have this certain character, just as we looked at the downtown and say we have a certain character that we think, and the Bonita Beach Road, we're developing those ideas. And it's not just us, it's not just our 7 people here, it's the community has told us that for 15 years, you know? So, and I do think that if we can use this process to reinforce an interest in having more collegiality between the county commissioner and us, because it seems to me that if I were in that position, I would have real interchange with both Fort Myers Beach and Bonita Springs, because we are the communities that are most affected by that. And don't forget that that bridge, as proposed, has been shifted south 300 feet into Bonita Springs. So it's really going to affect us quite a bit more than Fort Myers Beach. So any letter that anyone is willing to do in a collegial way is fine with me. And would you be...
Well, I think you should be doing a letter. You're on top of it,
Well,
Peter.
approve, well, I would do it with staff, but I would recommend that we ask them not to make the final decision on the 18th. Is that when it is?
December 18th.
December 18th, which is just, you know, like, it's just
Around
a
the
few
corner.
weeks away. I mean, why can't they do
13
it
days.
the next month or something?
Right.
Just so we have a chance to really look at this and to come up with something. I think that's the proper way for them to behave, as it's proper for us to be gentle with them.
Great, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Just a
Yeah.
quick comment, and I know it's getting late, but I don't know what staff has planned, but I think the letter should be made, and also I think during public comment on the 18th, unless we get a letter otherwise, that they pulled it off of the agenda. One of us, either council member or member of staff, go up there and voice the opinion that we would like you to defer this for the reasons either written in the letter or simple reasons that we haven't had time to really digest this. We've just found out about it. We've found out what your intentions are. Now let us react to your intentions.
I think it should be Peter and or Amy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be either fine. I think Peter needs to sign it, but, you know.
No, Peter signs it, but
Yeah.
somebody from here needs to go to,
Absolutely.
Right.
during
And
public comment on agenda
definitely.
items, unless it's pulled from the agenda, the voice needs to be
But
heard.
I think it's best for the policymakers to be the ones who are most
Yes.
talking about this and not putting staff in the
Yeah,
middle.
no,
Because
I
they have a
agree. I
lot of
don't disagree
relationship
with that. I
things
just
with the
didn't wanna
county. Yeah.
Single out one person, but
Yeah.
I personally can't do it. I have a deposition.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the first reading of the following zoning ordinances, no public comment allowed. You ready?
Hi,
You're
I'm
awful
ready.
quiet over there.
My voice coming back too. First one is a zoning ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request by Action Business Corp. to rezone approximately 1.2 acres from C1A Commercial Zoning District to the Community Commercial Zoning District located at 28186 South Tamiami Trail, Bonita Springs, Florida 34134, providing for an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Further discussion?
We're getting good at this.
Roll call, please.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Okay, second item. A zoning resolution of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request by Action Business Corp. for the granting of a special exception to allow a fast food restaurant to be located within an existing structure pursuant to Section 4-891 of the Land Development Code on approximately 1.2 acres within the Community Commercial Zoning District located at 28186 South Tamiami Trail, Bonita Springs, Florida 34134, and providing for an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye. Let me just make a
Okay.
comment if the public is watching. This is perfunctory moving things to a second reading where the real decision is made.
Correct. Third item, a zoning resolution of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request by Action Business Corp. for the granting of a variance to the special exception criteria of section 4-891, subsection 1, subsection 1, 3, 4 of the Land Development Code, requiring a 500-foot spatial separation from similar uses within the US 41 overlay to allow a fast food restaurant to be located within an existing structure on approximately 1.2 acres within the community commercial zoning district located at 28186 South Tamiami Trail, Bonita Springs, Florida 34134, providing for an effective date. And I want to make a quick correction. I forgot to put in acres after 1.2.
So moved.
Second.
With the correction of acres. Not hectares, but acres, right? Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Great. Derek?
All right, third item, this one, public comment is allowed at, but again, it is just a perfunctory first reading. It's an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, extending ordinance number 17-21 pertaining to land development regulations necessary for golf course conversions, extending the temporary moratorium on the processing of any applications for golf course conversions to other uses in the corporate boundaries of the City of Bonita Springs for the shorter of 1, 6 months, or 2, the enactment of a replacement ordinance providing for conflict, providing for severability, providing for scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date.
You want to take public comment, or want to
Yep.
move?
Any public comment at this time?
Again, Ben Hershenson, Fairwinds HOA. First of all, I want to express my support to extend the current moratorium. I think I've already done this in the past. However, at the same time, and I hope I'm not out of order, but it has to do very specifically with the 110-acre site of the former golf course. And after even listening to what I heard tonight, that it is my belief, and a very sincere belief, that the sooner all parties can come together regarding any planned development proposal, the sooner they can come together, the sooner understanding takes place on the part of the developer with the issues of the public, and the public understands the issues of the rights of a developer. What I like to focus on specifically is a recommendation for public input early, before the city gets involved with its due process, dealing with land regulations, et cetera, before any planned development actually comes to the table. And the sooner the process begins in the Golf and Country Club area, again, I can only think of a positive outcome. Specifically, and I hope again, as I say, this is in order, that the citizens of this area, and I'm kind of like putting myself ahead of a major meeting to get their support, but I think they would agree with this. And I'd like to suggest the possibility of a public forum to invite the potential developer of that 110-acre site to come to a public forum at a time that it's convenient for all, and the sooner the better. And this will, in my mind, would give the proponents of any planned development for that area an opportunity to present their case, and at the same time to hear the issues and concerns of the citizens in that area. In other words, let's get the public input going early on, because there are a lot of issues that we're going to have to deal with if this area is going to be developed. The forum obviously would be moderated by one of the citizens, and I've done this in the past, but I've learned my mistakes. We've already done it twice with respect to that same area. And I would be offering my services again, but that would be up to others perhaps to decide. And again, specifically, I'd like to see the potential developers of this area come to a meeting of the homeowners and to present their case or what their general idea is for that area. At the same time, the citizens can raise their issues and ask the questions. I can only see a positive outcome from all of this. But the only outcome I want to see, frankly, is to just start a dialogue as early as possible. Everybody has rights, and I'm concerned about the fact that everybody's rights are expressed. The homeowners have to understand what the issue is with the developer and vice versa. So again, that's my only hope, is that we can come together early on to begin to discuss whatever the plans might be or might not be. We just don't know, we can't predict. So I hope this council would support that, and I don't think if it's illegal to do it because the moratorium is in effect, I don't think so. This is an invitation on the part of the citizens of the Golf and Country Club area. Let's get all the information out as soon as possible so that they can be more intelligent about what our concerns are, and the citizens can learn what the rights are of the developer. I want to thank you.
Great, thank you, Ben. Other members of the public that would like to speak on this? John Domer.
He's only speaking as a member of the public. He actually has a real
John
problem.
Domer.
Hit the button, hit the button.
Yeah, right.
That's a good idea. Good evening again. In response to Mr. Hershensen's comments, we were already thinking something similar. However, he was looking at one meeting taking the place of two, as we understood it. One is we have been directed by council to hold outreach meetings, and we plan to do those as soon as we can get advertising done, obviously not scheduling a workshop during the week between Christmas and New Year's, but either before or afterwards, depending on how the advertising falls. The second point that he was making was the meeting with the applicant, and they will be required if they decide.
The advertising you're talking about is about
for our workshop.
The moratorium. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have made that more clear.
All right.
That will be for the discussion on the city's potential regulations.
Right.
And then a developer meeting would be part of your neighborhood information requirement, and that could happen at any time just prior to development. If they choose to work with Mr. Hershensen in terms of allowing him to moderate, that is entirely up to them. We have no issues with it as long as they meet the standards of our ordinance. They're welcome to take whatever format they choose. But in terms of what we plan to do, I want to make council aware so that as soon as we can get the ball rolling, we will get it rolling and start taking in that public input.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba? Aye. Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
No.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
I just want to make one comment. I think individually, I think Mr. Hershensen's idea is an excellent idea. It's obviously up to the developer and up to the community as to whether they want to do that. That's not something council directs anybody to do, particularly because we don't have a pending application. But I would say, having been to one of them, on one of the items, I think they had another one with Toll Brothers. I found it, just as a person from the district being there, to be a very constructive meeting, so, for what it's worth.
But don't we already we changed that regulation already, right?
Yeah, but he's not talking about what's in the regulation. He's talking about a separate community meeting.
But
by
in
the community.
order for an applicant, didn't we change that that we require them to have neighborhood meetings?
Two of them.
Yes.
Two of them.
Do require
right.
neighborhood
We don't have an
meetings.
application yet, as far as
But he's talking about doing it before the application?
There is a
not
requirement to have a neighborhood meeting prior to an application being
Right.
filed. However, there is nothing that excludes an applicant from doing an additional meeting. If they wish to do it specifically with Mr. Hershensen's HOA, that's fine. Or if they choose to bring him in on their meeting, that's entirely up to them. I don't know exactly what they would do or what they're wanting to do. I think it's very generous of Mr. Hershensen to help. I've seen him moderate meetings, and he does do a good job. But that's a developer question.
Right. Not ours. And it's up to the residents.
Right, great.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, moving right along here.
We're good?
All right, final first reading. An ordinance of the city of,
You know, I'd just like to say Audrey read like she'd like to read it.
wait, I thought that my enunciation of Action Business Corp was like, I didn't get a reaction.
Tough
Okay.
act to follow.
You got a lot of work on your syntax and tone, all right?
Just kidding. You know I'm kidding.
I've got some good stories on this.
He's
but,
got
not
a hard
for-
shell.
You got, it's a long night. An ordinance of the City Council of Bonita Springs, Florida, adopting the 2018 5-year capital improvement program annual update, providing for legislative findings, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date.
So moved. Well done.
There's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
And just as an advisory to council on this, I think previously we might have provided this list to the LPA, but it is not a requirement of the state law to do that in between, and in essence of keeping everything on time track of with our ear amendment process, we're going to go ahead and continue on with just the council approvals.
Okay. Dynamite. Okay. Derek, anything else?
The only other items I have are, and I know that you received an email from Arlene earlier about the billing so far. I want to give you an update on how that was going. So far for October, the retainer is $25,000 a month. We only billed $14,000. And I got the preliminaries this month. It's less than that for the following month. So we are on track to save the city a substantial amount of money. With regards to litigation on the Sanibel Water Management District case, I have reviewed and approved a proposed recommended order prepared by the petitioners. That's going out. I feel very good that we have a good shot at getting the proposed rule invalidated. That case wrapped up. We billed that separately from the litigation, but even combining that with what we did on the retainer, we're still under the monthly allowance. So looks like everything's moving smooth.
I just have, and thank you for that, fantastic. But I do have one question about the Sanibel thing. I thought when Mayor Ruane was here, that they had an attorney, and I understand it was something about somebody got conflicted out or whatever, and that the understanding is that we were chipping in with Estero and Fort Myers Beach and others, and I didn't. My recollection is I was thinking about a number like 5,000 or something.
Mhm.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing this,
Right.
but it's not the way it's evolved. So
Yeah,
the
the-
result is we're paying more legal fees.
The original presumption was that Sanibel's law firm, Henderson Franklin,
Okay.
would take the lead for all parties.
Right.
Then early on, they were conflicted out because of an objection by one of the sugar companies.
Oh.
Whether it was a legitimate
Whatever, it
objection or
happened.
not,
Yeah.
but the objection kicked it out, and all the other interveners, ourselves, Estero, Fort Myers, we ended up basically running our own show through the hearing, and until Sanibel got counsel that was actually Cape Coral's counsel to work it out. And so what I ended up doing for our part of it is I split the bill right down the middle between Estero and Bonita, so that we would save as much money as possible. But I don't think there's going to be any request for funding from Sanibel.
And do you think we're going to end up spending much more money?
I don't think we're going to spend anything more. I
Oh,
think we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you
Good
very
job.
much.
And we'll
Okay.
bring forward, if there's any other anticipated costs, we'll bring that forward to council.
Okay, dynamite. Okay, public comment. Members of the public that would like to speak. And seeing one.
Well, I'm the only one here from the
Yeah.
outside staff.
Yeah.
Tad's here.
Tad can come on up.
I think Ben's coming back.
Oh, is he?
Well, here I am again for the record, Kathy McGrath. First thing, I want to remind you about the boat parade Saturday night. Adam Botano, Baywater, and the Noon Rotary Foundation, they worked very hard for that. So I think most people know where the good viewing places are, unless you know somebody who lives on the river. There's Imperial Park, which is on the west side of US 41. On the east side is the boat ramp, and they start at Baywater and they come up the river and they go under the new 41 bridge as far as Holly Lane and then turn around and go back. So support them. And of course I have to talk about Holiday in the Park last night. I don't know how it happens, but they get better and better and better. And you know, with the staff and Nicole's Parks and Rec Gang and the Special Events Committee, we've all worked together now for, well, I've been doing it for 8 years. We just, if somebody needs something, someone's there to help. Just great. And I it was announced last night, I don't know whether everyone's aware of it, there was a lighting, holiday lighting contest on downtown Bonita. And the winner was Heaven Sent Flowers, and second place went to Almost Home, that's the name of it. And the third was Buffalo Chips, the Ranch House. And Heaven Sent got their recognition award, but the second and third place winners haven't yet, but Laura said they will get them, they will be recognized. So, and there's not any one person that you could pull out and say was the best of this, but I do have to give recognition to one person, and it's David Zimmerman of Royal Scoop, because at the very last minute, Michelle, our chair, said, you know, after about 3 hours, everyone gets tired and starts going home. She says, my a cappella group, which is an award-winning a cappella group from Fort Myers High School, wasn't performing until 8 o'clock. She says, what are we going to do to keep the people here? Now, this is like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She says, well, how about we have a dance contest? Well, what are we going to do for prizes? Well, how about Royal Scoop? So I go over to Royal Scoop with $50, and I said, David, here's what's happening. It's last minute. We really want to have some prizes. So we thought Royal Scoop would be great. $25 first prize, 15 second. And he says, put your money away. I'll donate it. That's typical David. So, but if y'all didn't see it, the contest was incredible. I mean, we had 20, from little ones to big ones. And when the winners were announced, there were still like over 30 minutes to go. We opened up the stage, and you should have seen them. And the people stayed and watched it, so that 8 o'clock, when the final performers are there, they had a good group. So David, well, you know, they've always been so generous. And I think that's about all.
Wonderful.
It was really great. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, other members of the public? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the city. You got another item, Derek? I apologize.
No, we did that earlier.
Yeah, all right. Arlene? Yeah, no.
Just a few quick
I don't know what agenda I'm
announcements.
looking at. I got my own over here, I guess.
We're working on scheduling the first Charter Review Committee meeting. We're looking at Monday, January 14th at 4 p.m. We've had a preliminary meeting with our chair, Jackie McCurdy, and we will be doing some outreach. She would like to set up one-on-one meetings with each of the council members to kind of get an idea of your goals for the committee as well. And so we'll continue to send out the agenda to all of council as well, so that you can be apprised of the agenda items. Staff participated in a conference call with DPZ to begin the initial understanding of what we'd be looking as a project as sort of signage and gateway and branding citywide. We're continuing to receive updates regarding the Levin Lawn and Bamboo properties, and we're looking to come back in the spring with an additional workshop and some more feedback on that as well. They're continuing to work on the form-based code, and we're looking also to have an update beginning the first of the year on that. And then our Public Works Department has removed the entryway sign on the Old 41 side. So, and we're going to work on refurbishing the sign on the beach. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of staff for their hard work and dedication for Holiday in the Park as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Matt, anything?
No, just probably, whatever.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. Okay. Anything else, Arlene?
That's all I have.
Okay, dynamite. Moving on to mayor and council member items. Amy?
Okay, I just want to recognize the passing of President George H.W. Bush, and I did have the opportunity to watch some of the ceremonies there, and I think it was particularly poignant because of those of us who work in government and have volunteer to improve our communities, because we need inspiration. And sometimes we get, I don't know about you, but I get tired every once in a while because I said, oh my goodness, this has taken so much time. And you lose sight of what you're doing, and you think about how much that man did for our country and for his family and for his city and for his state. And so we should just keep up the good work and be inspired by those kinds of people. So I appreciated his service to our country. And I too want to mention Holiday in the Park, which I thought was great, but I want to point out that Laura and her staff did a remarkable job, because maybe not all of you know, but they ran into a glitch with one of the contractors where it looked like they weren't going to be able to deliver the snow and the slide and all this other stuff like 5 days before this thing. So they went around in 5 days and were able to get a new purveyor and give us the ice and some of these little things that were so wonderful about that. But they really had to scramble, and I think they did a remarkable job. And so I just wanted to point out what a good job they did. And lastly, I don't know if you noticed it, but the two of the three sculptures that we approved of, the kinetic sculptures that are on River Park, they're up now, and you can actually see them from 41. So the next time you go, look over into the northwest corner and watch them go around. They're actually cool, and I can't wait for I don't think we've approved the third one, but we probably will in January, and we'll get the third one up. So that's really, I think you're really going to like them. So look at them the last time you go. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Amy. Greg?
No, I just want to echo, Holiday in the Park was great. I think it really demonstrated what the people of Bonita Springs love about Bonita Springs, was coming there and celebrating tree lighting and everything. So that thing was great, and congratulations to staff. Job well done.
Thanks, Greg. Laura?
I'm good.
You're good? Pete?
Yeah, in a holiday park, it was amazing to see all those young children there. If there was ever an event, that's a quality event, that's it. Fabulous. Two other things. One is, evidently it's getting to be an issue of these jet ski tours tearing through Estero Bay. So I'm going to have a chat with Arlene and Matt about that, see what the facts are, et cetera, and what, if anything, we can do about it. Last one, I want to thank Matt and our old friend Jennifer Hecker, who's now with Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program. They put on a presentation yesterday at Bonita Bay that I organized, and on the whole red tide, the algae, the whole business, and absolutely comments afterwards, the professionalism of our assistant city manager and the completeness with which he presented. And Jennifer did a fabulous job as well. So I just want to publicly thank them for that.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Pete. Mike? I'm good, thanks. Fred?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think you'll probably got a copy of it. We're going to have a meeting, room 118, next week on Thursday, with the people out east of I-75, primarily Bonita National, regarding updates on what's being done to get cell tower improvements, to get actually good reception out there. The reception is close to a half a bar or less. And also there are objections about one of the proposed solutions, which is to build a tower right beside Bonita National, within 500 feet of a whole lot of homes. But on the other hand, if that happened, it would improve the reception. But there's several other parallel things all happening at the same time that will automatically improve the reception out there.
Okay. Kathy mentioned the boat parade. That's Saturday night, Holiday in the Park. I mean, I don't know. You know, you always look at crowds, but in my mind, that was the biggest and the best crowd there ever. And I don't know, there was definitely thousands of people there. It was just absolutely fab. No matter where you went, it was crowded. I couldn't even get near the horses. I'm trying to get over near the horses, but couldn't get there. But it was unbelievable, and great work, team, everybody involved. So thank you so much. You heard Juan Romero talk earlier about Isla Mujeres. I received a formal invitation. As we know, 6 or 8 months ago, the mayor of Isla Mujeres came up here and we signed the sister city agreement. So it was an invitation to come down and reciprocate and kind of formalize on the other end of things our sister city agreement with him. Matt and I met earlier today with John Jenkins from Bonita Springs Utilities, Tiffany Esposito with the Chamber, Terry Lemaine with the Bonita Springs Assistance Office, representatives from the Rotary Club, members of the Lions Club were not there, but they've expressed an interest, in Bob Rozier with the insurance company. They've all expressed, for one reason or another, whether it's Rotary or service clubs, private enterprise, if you will, some business opportunities down there, water, tourism, development, assistance in one form or another. Matt, can you kind of give us a synopsis of the meeting? I know you took a lot of notes,
Yeah, it took
and I didn't. I never do.
3 or 4 pages. No, basically, so Mr. Perry and his wife Debbie were also there with the Rotary Club, and I just wanted to mention them. But there seemed to be some potential for synergy through the Sister City program for a lot of different things. I think Mr. Romero mentioned one with literacy. He was talking about literacy with workers in the tourism industry down in Isla Mujeres, but the folks at Rotary were also mentioning that they advocate for literacy for children, and perhaps there was an opportunity to, through this vehicle, set up a program kind of through the Rotary too for Skype, bilingual lessons basically between school kids. So there seemed to be some opportunity there with that aspect, as well as with ideas like the sports clubs and things. So they, there was discussion about, just really kind of early discussion about what potentials, connections could be made between the two cities through the Sister City program. But really, the next step, I think, was...
Right, and I just, does council see a value of me going down there to reciprocate to the Sister City agreement in a public official role? Because I certainly know these individuals, from a private point of view, see a lot of value in going down. Not that you want to rank it, but I mean, I think John Jenkins was immediately on top of me months ago about going down there, seeing the business potential, as are others. So I just wanted to, I don't know.
They're going to go?
They would like to. They would like to, yes. They would like to, but they don't know. Look, nobody's ever done this, so it's not like there's a playbook. How do we do this? What do we do? What do we want to get out of it? But where we left it for next steps with the meeting is that we're going to line up a call with the mayor of Isla Mujeres and his team that came up here 6 or 8 months ago, with the folks that were involved in this meeting that have expressed an interest. So didn't know if there were any questions or,
Pursue it, see what.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, there was some consensus. The next step was really to call the mayor, and then of Isla Mujeres or Isla Mujeres, and then possibly, that might lead to some kind of follow-on delegation, small delegation, that maybe could go down and reciprocate what happened here.
It's nice that a bunch of organizations from around town are interested.
Right, oh, yeah. No, and it wasn't, right, I mean, it kind of, there again, organically, this started organically, and, they saw the coverage on it, or they saw it on Facebook, or they read about it, or heard about it, or somebody told them, and they've all approached me over the months. Hey, what's going on here? We'd love to go. We see the value in it. So, Matt, that was a good meeting, but it was here just to kind of bring you guys up to speed and see if you like the idea to pursue it and follow up, and if so, we certainly will.
I mean, obviously, it'd be reasonable cost. You have to tell you that.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
With us.
Is the chamber going to advertise it to their membership so some others
Yeah.
might want to join in on it?
I think so.
That's good.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And I'd like to echo Amy's, we've all met political figures, if you will, and I'll tell you what, and it was a long time ago, and I was a lot younger, and I had a comment from the picture. I'm not sure whose sweater. He was Vice President Bush at the time. This was in the White Mountains in New Hampshire in 1986, and a group of us from the University of New Hampshire went up to meet the Vice President Bush and his wife, Barbara. It was fall foliage, but, it was kind of everything's political, but to get him some exposure and all of that. But the time that he took with us, and there was less than a dozen of us. I mean, he spent over an hour with us, answering questions, taking pictures, talking about this, what about the, what an absolutely gentle, you see that I want a kinder, gentler nation. I think, I know we need more of that in this world. And when you look at, and I only saw a few clips, but when you look at the animosity that was there with the current president, seems like that's been resolved. You look at the bipartisanship, and, one of Bill Clinton, President Clinton, I guess, did not have much of a father figure in his life. So think about this, a man that defeats President 41, he ends up being a father figure to the next president who defeats him. look, I'd like to think I'd be able to do that. I can't look you in the eye and tell you I would do that. So that speaks to what type of a man he was, and he certainly gave it his all. He gave it from a, I wouldn't say a passive, because he could be very, very tough, but you just don't see a lot of that type of leadership anymore, and I think it'll be sorely missed and sorely needed. So just seriously, forget whatever you thought of his politics, one way or another. As a human being, absolutely top notch. So, God rest your soul and bless your soul. And the coverage that I did see of the funeral, Amy, and I don't know how much you saw, but I saw some this morning. It was absolutely unbelievable. Very inspiring. No, exactly. You hear me, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what to say. I was very much moved by it, absolutely. Right, and please, if you haven't seen some coverage, find some coverage, so.
Yeah, it's funny, I met him briefly after his presidency, but exactly what you said.
Right.
Very regular.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, so then all of a sudden, then I met him for a second time in 2006, up in Maine, campaigning for Senator Olympia Snow. She was very popular, but, let's face it, you're in the U.S. Senate, you run for, and went up to Kennebunkport, and the special guest was then past, he had not been the president for a few years, President Bush, and up in Kennebunkport, in his element, in his boat shoes, his dock shoes. I mean, I didn't know you then, Ben, but in 2006 in Kennebunkport, at the hotel right down at the bottom of the hill or halfway up the hill from the Walker's Point, absolutely gracious with the crowd and just fabulous. Had crossover appeal for everybody. It didn't matter who you were, because you know what? If he disagreed with you, what do you say? You would disagree respectfully, and you would talk about what you can find common ground on and what you could agree with. You didn't throw up the wall and just throw up your hands and say, forget it. He was just a very special individual, and thank you for your service to our country. So with that, Council, anything else? We're going to...
I want to
Yeah,
chime
Fred.
in. I met him too back when he was running for re-election on several occasions, and he was just really an ordinary guy that was present.
Right.
With
Right.
super skills, wore his cowboy boots and all that.
No, absolutely.
Did he win Ohio?
I think he might have, but didn't do well the other places.
Yeah. No, and that was a three-person race.
Right.
And the
Ross
third,
Perot.
Ross Perot.
Yeah, 20%
right.
of the vote, yeah.
Exactly. That 20% and 80% of that was out of Bush's vote total, but that's another subject.
Right.
And all three candidates were.
That was an old Texas dogfight. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but they were all left-handed.
Is that right?
And
Oh,
left-handed
yeah. I didn't know.
represented only 10% of the population, all three.
Oh, wow. Very good, Laura. Wow.
You must be left-handed.
I am.
Is there a secret handshake for lefties? Yeah. No.
Can't tell us.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second for approval of minutes. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
O'Flynn? Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba? Aye. Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Okay, great. Any last public comment, Kathy? Okay, great.
I'm sorry, something
No.
I've forgotten. First of all, I was home today and I had TV. The ceremony was very, very, very moving, and I learned a lot. The other thing I forgot to mention, you talk about glitches. Laura and her staff, there were some 11th hour changes, and how they pulled it off, I don't know, but what I forgot to bring up, remember, we had a skating rink. And that was really fun to watch that. So that was really, really great. So I think that's all I have forgotten. But
Okay.
thanks very much for letting me add that. And, oh, I know what I was going to say about Isla de Mujeres. I was at that ceremony. I met the mayor.
Right.
And I remember what was said. And one of the things said is really how much in common Isla de Mujeres and the city of Bonita has as far as tourism and weather and beaches. We do. And I think hearing people interested like John Jenkins, like everyone else, but I think it'd be very important for you, Mayor, to go down there because the mayor of Isla came here, so I think it's important that you go too.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.